White,
Here.
Mark Catlin, Don Ely,
Here.
Ben Vandenbrink,
Here.
Doug Monger, Ruby Hazard. Here. Taylor Haas.
And Director Monger just walked in.
Sorry.
We are going to start with you. And we are going to go through each of these resolutions individually. And we will do a motion in front of each or not, but we will go through to each one of them. Okay?
So I think most of you were at the budget workshop. We did have a few minor changes to the budget since the workshop. We put in the HSA contributions of $1,000 per employee, 22 employees. We put in $10,000 into the capital fund. In this year for the water conservation and efficiency project, for the design of that project, that's going to go out in front of our headquarters here. And then we put in about $5,000 into the enterprise fund for some reservoir operations expenses. Other than that, the budget did not change. So if I want to open it up to any questions or discussion about it, if anybody has anything.
Director Khan.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for the list of the account or the line items and what it did or what it is. I don't know if that, I can't find it.
Oh, you can?
I know it's on here,
It's the last page.
but I wanted to thank you for
You're
doing that.
welcome. That was a good idea.
Okay, and actually, since this is a public hearing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna open the public hearing. You'd like to present the first item?
The first resolution. that we had. I'm gonna try to pull it up on the screen here.
Well, Madam Chair, I just have a question, and Ian, so
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
start off, and it's a more general question, back on the whole thing. All of the resolutions, none of them have numbers in them.
Well,
So how do we tie the numbers, benchmark the numbers back to the resolution when you pass a resolution that doesn't have a number in it?
well, there's two resolutions. There's the third to last and the second to last page. The one
Okay.
resolution to appropriate sums of money has 3 figures on here, and these are the governmental fund figures.
Okay,
Okay, so these are where we're appropriated for the 2022 spend.
okay,
And then the next one is the appropriate the sums of money for the enterprise fund for 2022. So they're in there, you just didn't see them, I think.
okay, well, and I guess, I don't know, everybody does these a little different, you know, and anyhow, I'm good.
Okay,
So
okay.
you're comfortable that the top numbers tie together
Oh, yes.
and that we have an historical perspective of what we approved, so that when we can come back and amend the
Yes.
number that we
Yeah,
had.
we do have that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem. We want to make sure everybody, this is an important task. And I don't mean to rush it at all. We did have, however, extensive discussion about the budget at our budget workshop on September 30th. So please, if you do have questions, or if there's anything that looks odd, please do not hesitate to ask. Or if there's something that still needs to be discussed, not in any way trying to shortchange this discussion. But hopefully Ian will kind of highlight anything that's changed, and otherwise it is as it was on the 30th when we discussed it in detail. Yes, Director.
So I apologize. So another general question, a broad-based question. So we now are, and again, based on our expensing of personnel and the rest, and we are doing time counting or some type of time counting on our employees and charging back to the departments, I believe, I'm pretty certain. So does that include the general fund partnership account that we're gonna set up?
No,
Ian?
we are not allocating salaries to the community funding partnership.
Okay, so I'm good, whatever.
Good question.
So we just need to get it out on the
Good
table.
Yeah, Director,
Excellent
Director
question.
Monterey, I do think it's a great question. We're only allocating them between the general fund and the enterprise fund.
Yep.
But because within the general fund, the capital fund, and if approved today, there will be a community funding partnership fund.
Right,
Then those, any work that our staff does on related to those other issues is all general fund, time. And that's where that time is booked, is in the general fund. That makes sense.
no, it does, I guess is just for general discussion, I think it needs to be noted that, that's that much less that we're taking out of 7A to put back into the partnership fund that we probably coulda, woulda, shoulda, maybe at a later point in time, taken out of the funding partnership to pay for the program.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure we got that on record.
And I think it's
To the goodwill of all.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, I mean, there are significant administrative costs associated with that funding program. We devoted one full-time FTE to that. And as we hire our new contracts manager, who, we had someone leave and we're replacing that position. That position has been revamped about a third time, be specifically devoted to the community funding partnership. So there are costs, resource costs associated with that. We just, from our perspective, try and get as much money from 7A back into that community funding partnership is the direction that we'd like to head.
That's very good. Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure we got that noted on record.
I think that's important, no problem.
I do think it is important.
So before we take up the resolutions, we'll just see if there's any public comment on the proposed budget. This is the public comment portion of the public hearing. Is there any public comment? There's no public here in person. Is there anyone with us? Audrey, are you seeing anyone raising?
There's nobody who has their hand raised or has.
All righty. There appears to be no public comment, so we'll close the public hearing. And now we are into deliberation and action, and we will take each resolution individually.
The first resolution we have before us is the resolution to establish a community funding partnership fund.
I move to approve the resolution to establish a community funding partnership fund.
Second.
Second, Richard. Is there any discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the resolution says approximately $4.2 million. Is that enough leeway to manage it up or down? Does the board traditionally set a cap on funds or just an approximate figure like that?
This is, of course, the first time we've done this
Right.
resolution as part of this package. I would defer to legal counsel as to whether that is sufficiently ambiguous to provide some leeway.
I believe that it is.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Okay. Now we'll get into the budget resolutions. The next one we have in front of us is the budget, or the resolution to amend the 2021 general fund budget.
I move to approve the resolution to amend 2021 general fund budget.
Sorry.
Any discussion or questions on this one? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay.
Okay, next is the resolution to adopt the 2022 general fund budget.
I move to approve the resolution to adopt 2022 general fund budget.
Second.
Motion by Chandler Henry and second by Hazard. Thank you. Director Hazard, thank you. Any further discussion or questions? In favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, that one passes.
Next, we have the resolution to amend the 2021 capital projects fund budget.
Move to approve the resolution to amend 2021 capital projects fund budget.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Alby. Discussion or questions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That one passes.
Okay, next is the resolution to adopt the capital projects fund 2022 budget.
Move to approve the resolution to adopt 2022 capital projects fund budget.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Gray. All those, any questions or concerns? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay.
Okay, next is the resolution to amend the 2021 community funding partnership fund budget.
Move to approve the resolution to amend 2021 community funding partnership fund budget.
Second.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Hazard. Any questions, concerns? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes.
Okay, next is the resolution to adopt the community funding partnership fund 2022 budget.
Move to approve the resolution to adopt 2022 community funding partnership fund budget.
Second.
Okay, motion by Chandler Henry, second by Richard. Any questions, concerns? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That one passes.
Okay, next is the resolution to amend the 2021 enterprise fund budget.
Move to approve the resolution to amend 2021 enterprise fund budget.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Alby. Any questions, concerns? All those in favor, aye. Any opposed, nay. That one passes.
Okay, next is the resolution to adopt the 2022 enterprise fund budget.
I move to approve the resolution to adopt 2022 enterprise fund budget.
Second.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Vandenbrink. Questions, concerns? All those in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. That one carries.
Okay, next is the resolution to appropriate sums of money for the governmental funds.
Move to approve the resolution to appropriate sums of money for the governmental funds, which are general fund, capital projects funds, and community funding partnership fund.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Hazard. Any questions or concerns? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. That one passes.
Okay, next is the resolution to appropriate sums of money for the proprietary fund, also known as the Colorado River Water Projects Enterprise.
I move to approve the resolution to appropriate sums of money for the enterprise fund.
Second by Gray. Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Gray. Concerns, questions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes.
All right, next is the resolution that authorizes and directs the transfer of monies to the Community Funding Partnership Fund from the general fund for the year ended December 31st, 2021.
That one, okay. Move to approve the resolution to transfer unspent 2021 balances.
Second.
Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Vandenbrink. Any questions or concerns? Yes.
I don't have a concern, just kind of a question. Is it, at the budget meetings, did you guys talk any about earmarking some money in the projects fund that maybe for some down the road, project that transfer, it seems like that'd be a good slot for that transfer from the general fund to be a placeholder for some to accumulate maybe for a bigger project, I don't know, or for something, I don't know.
Yeah, Director Gray, we had an extensive discussion about not feeling pressure to spend the 4.2 and whatever else is transferred over to that every year, but to build up a large reserve in the fund for a significant project or projects that will come our way in the future. And I think, can't speak for the board entirely, but they seem to endorse that concept. And so that's,
There was a lot of discussion about it. We didn't talk about putting it into some separate piggy bank, but just.
Okay, good answer. I would, I'm gonna vote yes. I just think I think I would be in favor of an earmark for maybe at that portion that's transferred over. I don't know, kind of making a separate spot for the money. Just a thought.
Director Munger.
So I think the bigger optic, Director Gray, is that we didn't want it sitting in the general fund.
Yep.
And look like we're hoarding money and the rest. And so, you know, it's available and we'll do projects with it as we go. And I don't know whether you identify it as future projects money or we had the discussion also about transferring into the projects. So, you know, we might have some things that we need to do for ourselves too.
or into the capital.
For the
Yeah,
capital.
in the capital fund, yeah.
And once you put in, you have his done with in the county, once you put something in road and bridge, you can never get it back.
No,
It's
it's not
not
like,
this
it's
way.
not like road and bridge, because you have to share that stuff with your municipalities, so,
But so this can go back.
This could, the board could, if there were an emergency situation, go back. But I would say the intention is clear that we are hoping to have a growing fund balance in the capital, or in the, excuse me, in the CFP fund, so that we can fund those large projects in the future. And you'll note, based on staff recommendation, at least, that there will be a balance this year in from the 4.2. And we're not recommending that the board spend all of that this year, and therefore that would be a carryover.
Thank you. I've been in the budget meeting, or could have been, I would have known all that.
All right, no problem. Is there any further discussion? All right, then all in favor, aye.
I,
Any opposed, nay. I think it completes the documents. Is there anything else that we need to do with the, you just included in the packet all budget documents?
Yeah, I'll have them all for your signature.
Perfect. All right. We're going to go, before we start up the community funding partnership, this is when we are going to do director concerns and just information. And Director Munger, let's start with you.
So I think I voiced enough last meeting over the, yeah, I continue to be a struggling thing up there in Rock County and Yampa Basin and the rest. Whole bunch of things going on, man. We got a whole bunch of things going on between the integrated water management planning, stream management plan, and then the drought, and then the over appropriation of the Yampa, and then the measurement rules, which are not statewide. So, yeah, we're just staying on our toes, and I think Andy said this before too, we're staying frightfully nimble so that we can move.
Okay, Director Vandenberg. I do, didn't I?
VIP comment period is open right now. So your Yampa, White, Green, Gunnison, all the other round tables, their VIPs are up for comment. I urge the River District to open them up and provide some comments and feedback, but also any other director on this round table, and to share that with your constituents. So comment period is from October 13th to November 15th on the engagecwcb.org website. I'm not going to elaborate on Doug's piece over there, but you know, with the water planning going on, This year, we had 3 rounds of Cladofra that grew in the White River. It started May 18th, which is about another 3 weeks earlier than it has in the past. Not based upon flow. It wasn't based upon temperatures because the temperatures were cold and the flows were high. Subjectively, for when we've seen it grow in the past, so. So we dealt with that, Rangeley did, a lot of irrigators, but then on top of that, it was kind of unique, and I visited with some district staff about it, with the drought and the low flows. We had Texas and Oil Springs Mountain that burned up, but then we had some serious flash flooding, and it actually plugged the river. You'd have high sediment loads coming to the river, and the river would turn to like whole milk. Real thick, real heavy. And it fouled and plugged up diversion structures, intakes for pumps. And it took about 175 CFS of water to move that out to open these pumps up. So we had people that just couldn't irrigate. Not because the water wasn't there, but because their pump was buried. And I'd never seen that before. And I witnessed a fish kill this year when that happened. So that was rather unique. So the flash flooding that we had to also covered Highway 64 with about 5-6 feet of water at Gilm Draw and right at Taylor Draw Dam, to where we moved boulders the size of pickups. It blew them babies right on out of there. So, and that's at a project that I manage. So that next year we have to go in there and remediate that. So the flash flooding is very unique. I don't like it. You just stand and just got to let it be and get everybody safe. So, we are progressing with the White River Management Plan, PBO. We're actually writing chapters now. I think we're getting up to chapter 3 on there. I'm hoping there's not like 30 chapters to this thing, because we're year 22 from start to where we're almost being there. So I know Mike is participating with this, and I would encourage the River District to encourage Mike to provide feedback where he feels appropriate with that group or with myself, and I'll gladly carry those messages forward, since you're not an official party per se. But I would be more than happy to carry that forward. So something unique that's starting to hit us, and I'm glad Director McGinnis brought this up, is we've been approached by the Department of Public Health and Environment about instituting a TMDL program within the White River system. And I'm scratching my head like, what the hell do you want to do that for? You have 2 towns, so you want to go after those little municipalities that are your point sources and do what? That's already not covered under Reg 85. So I'm not sure what's up with that, but I know there's more conversation developing. This isn't their first time asking. So I don't know, but I know I've been talking with the state more about the Cladofra, and I'm going to kind of bounce back to that a little bit, because we have found like low levels of phosphorus, very low levels, but it doesn't take much phosphorus to get stuff to grow, so we continue to see. We found a loop in there to where when we did our sampling for the Cladofra and the nutrients and the TMDL, and they were talking about the TMDLs, that they quit feeding fish because they were able to time it when we were doing our USGS sampling. So they quit feeding. We took our samples. They got done with that year. Now they went back feeding again. It was like dirty, rotten buggers. So they're back feeding again. So, but it's odd where you can go upriver and see right where the feeding starts, because there's the Cladofra. And then you go down. So with the TMDLs, I don't know if they're intertwined. I believe they are, because we are getting some data back, but it's concerning when I hear them want to do that now. And they don't have a real rationale or strong arguments on why they want to impose it on a 2-horse county, with the towns, and very few NPDS permits, gravel pits would be about it. So I know it's something that we will probably be conversing more with the River District. And I don't know what the capacity, but I know they want me to visit more with their communities next week and let them know what's kind of going to happen if you get a TMDL on your river. So we're still learning on that. Just one more thing that they're throwing at you that you're going to have to deal with. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Director Gray.
I'm kind of like Doug. I think we pretty much brought you up to speed on what's going on with probably the driest portion of the state. We didn't get as much benefit from the monsoons. We got some, and we're thankful for that, but still pretty dry. You can go through the litany. We've seen it yesterday, the flow of the river, 30%. And most of the people I've talked to, including my own ranch, our crops are about 2/3 hay crop. normal. People were hauling water, recreation was way down, and a portion of the river through Steamboat was shut down for, I don't know how many days, but, municipal supplies are okay. I think it's important to say, though, that there's nothing that can be done. It's what God gave us, and so we can whine and do, but that's not, there's some things you can't do anything about. This, we did do, I want to say thank you to the River District for you guys. We brought it back to the board, and he had the ability to approve 50,000 for those reasons. You know, we brought it to you guys, and you guys were on board. That helped immensely. We have minimal storage in the valley, but the storage we have, we're beginning to use, which is a new idea. We have that Yampa River Fund, which now is reached at $5 million, which is a trust fund. So 4% is the target to take it, be able to take revenue from that, without depleting the balance. So there's a couple $100,000, and that's for water. Number one, I'm on that board, and the number one purpose is to augment flow. There's other things it can do, but flow augmentation is a big one. So there's going to be ability to continue to use our stored water that we have, and some of that the River District, we're going to be needing, rather than us, through our projects fund, always is donating. I'm going to tell you right now, I'll probably be, depending on what hydrology is, as we get closer to spring, I'll probably be asking for some money, because it was such a benefit, and I'm maintaining there's no higher and better use for that project fund, because everybody benefits from all the users talked about. So, but thank you. I mean, it's good to see a little good news once in a while when you're as dry as this, to say, well, but we did as much as we could do. So I think we did. Other than that, I heard all the rest. So.
Thank you, Director Gray. Director McGinnis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for being late, but all of you got a copy, I hope, of the Tmdl discussion that we're going on in Mesa County. We have 4 major drainages that go right through our community. And so 76% of our land, Eagle reads this, but federal land. And when we have those water gushers, all that salinity comes right off there, and the feds don't do a thing about it, but they want to stick it to us. And last year, when they were talking about it, the estimate was in excess of 200 million, 150, 200 million that we have to go to the different points. I mean, it's massive. So what we're asking for in that document, I won't go through it in detail with you. It's just a 2-page, very quick read, give you a little background. The key on it is that on the water bodies concern that they're focusing right now is the lower Colorado River Basin, and that includes all tributaries. If you're not on the main, then that doesn't mean that you're not going to be pulled into this. And in our particular situation, we have more than 30 streams and river segments that they can look at. The next section is just the issuance of it. Probably most important for you is on page 2. It's the issues with the DMDLs. We cover source allocation very briefly, allocation of loads, DMDL allocation and implementation responsibilities. Those are all bullet points, easy to read, but a quick learn on it. And then we have requested to stay, and we're currently waiting to hear from their attorneys to see if we'll get a 3-year stay because of the financial consequences. Fortunately, in Mesa County, because of the size of the county's workforce, we have a lot of expertise that we can retain. So we have some good in-house expertise. In addition, we've got a pretty strong legal team. We probably have 9 or 10 in-house attorneys. So we've got capability to assist the River District on this as well, and we're more than willing to do it. But we all remember a few years ago when they decided to pick on the hot springs pool over here for that salinity. Well, this is that by a factor of hundreds that they're coming in. So we're keeping a very close eye on that. Yesterday, I think the discussion was really helpful, but I do want to point out down in our area, if you allow fields to go completely fallow, that goes back to desert. When you ride through Grand Junction, you can look north and see what it used to look like down there. and you look south and see what we have. And I don't think the citizens down there are gonna be too willing to convert the south to look like the north. But I think what we had our discussion yesterday was very productive, very good. And I do want to thank Andy. I brought, when I first got appointed, I brought some of the water users, people together, and Andy very quickly did a conference. We asked for a half hour. He knew we'd take an hour, took the hour. And then we'll probably, he volunteered yesterday to come back down and meet in person with our ditch people down there. And as you know, we have some of the most senior rights on the river and the largest quantity rights. And we also have a massive drainage system, and it all ties in. I think we have 600 or 700 miles of drainage that are different than the irrigation canals. So it's a big issue. So just to thank you. And that concludes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's a huge issue. And it sounds like the White House, the same issue.
Yeah, and we'll help our allies up there too, if we can, with information.
I wish I knew the
We've got some
rationale.
in-house
Sorry,
expertise.
I just wish I knew the rationale.
It's because they can do it. It's very similar to us. What happened on the Colorado is they came in, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and said it was habitat for the yellow cuckoo. At any rate, when we got down to and were able to ask them questions, we asked them how they determined it, because the Colorado Department of Wildlife came in and said, this is not an nesting area. This is not habitat for that particular bird, period. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife went crazy and said, we have spottings. So we asked them to lay it out in detail, the spottings for us, and who determines it. And they said, well, it's just if a citizen calls and thinks they heard one, they don't even have to see one. They don't have to have any training. They don't have to have any expertise. All they have to do is make a call that they heard one or saw one, and it automatically goes down as a sighting. That's what we're facing with. And that whole corridor, which is of course right through the center of our communities and our population area down there, that thing will have very dramatic impacts. And it'll also have dramatic impacts if they get that endangered habitat status in there, is the private property next to it. Now, they'll claim that the private property is exempt, but there's a nexus, and the nexus is conservation easement, because it has federal funding involved in it to fund the conservation easement. And that's a nexus for them to reach over on top. So it all centers on the Colorado. So that's enough for me.
Thank you very much. Director Hesser.
Well, I'm glad Saguache County is slow here. So we don't have all of that excitement, but we did get some rain. So the hay was a whole lot better this year. Some of the ranchers were near what they were in the past. There's still a lot of selling going on in our area. There's one ranch that above us that did sell. I'm not sure what their intent is, but my valley is Coachtuck Valley is one of the last places in Colorado that's not got subdivision, so we're thankful for that also. But people are constantly looking and trying to convince everybody to sell. We have speculation like everywhere else, and they're throwing out big numbers, and I don't know how long people with no children or health issues are going to hold out. But thankfully we're still intact, because as far as ag, and we have fishing and hunting, but as far as rafting, we don't have that. So that also is good for Saguache County as far as keeping it somewhat the same way for the last 100 years. We're seeing a lot of different people coming in, but I don't see the camps and the campers as drastic as it had been. And, all summer there was people, I think, living out there. And so hopefully there's a little bit of a turn there. I don't know whether they're moving back to where they came from or they're moving up higher. But anyway, that does seem to have slowed down. So
Thank you. So I touched base with our county commissioners to see what they've been hearing from their constituents and what they would like me to bring up. And the number one issue was the Blue Mesa reservoir levels. And what I heard from what I heard from them and from other folks is that there isn't a lot of confusion about the Bureau of Reclamation's entitlement there and their right to make the releases. That's not the issue. The issue in the minds of a lot of people in Gunnison County was how it was handled and how it could have been handled better. And they're hoping that the River District, we're all hoping that the River District might think about helping us improve communications at the county level with the Bureau. And our understanding from what Tmdl said a little while back was that the state had been notified 2 weeks before those releases had occurred, and that the state had okayed it, because I think that's what Ms. Trujillo said. And then I don't know, my commissioners read about it in the newspaper. They were never notified. We were never talked to about how even if we could have waited 2 weeks, we wouldn't have wiped out our marina and all of our access points for boating. And then we had a couple of bays that, because the water's so shallow, we got that toxic algae. So then we had, even if you wanted to walk all the way down to the water, you couldn't go in anyway because it would kill your dog or your kid. So I wanted to just put out there that we would really appreciate the influence and help of Andy and Peter on this in the future. And if they want to do releases again, they kind of spent their bank account. So I don't know if, the lake will recover much next year, and we understand this is a Chris project and that this is how this is life, but maybe they could have waited and run Flaming Gorge water first for a little longer, or given us 2 weeks, because we really value those reservoir levels. So I don't expect a plan, but you guys are so influential, it might have helped us if we could have had a line of communication, because our commissioners read about this in the newspaper.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, we certainly hear you, and we can make sure that message is received by the Bureau. They've certainly heard it from us in the state of Colorado as well. Interestingly enough, whatever it's worth, they were very sensitive about the levels of Navajo, and you'll note on that release schedule that Navajo released much later than they
Waited.
and that had to do with this project down there, the Navajo Indian pipeline area. And so I think it is important to help the Bureau communicate. The one thing I would say, just to clarify, is that the Bureau told the 4 upper basin states that it was doing these releases. It did not seek their concurrence or request. They told them. So
Okay.
No one at our state government or any other government within our state said that was okay or fine. But they were notified 2 weeks before the releases started under the emergency provisions in the DROA agreement. So I think our state is just as disturbed as the county commissioner.
Okay.
I frankly, I appreciate knowing that the county commissioners weren't notified. We certainly saw that come out the day that it was announced and could have gotten it to them. And so that's our failing, my failing, and we'll work on that in the future. Really important for everybody to understand, the states and the Bureau are in communications right now, actual consultation about scheduling and the size of the next DROA operation, which will occur in 2022. And how that occurs is of great importance. And you're right, I don't know how they're gonna squeeze blood from a turnip if the Mesa is that turnip, but the majority of that water will have to come from Flaming Gorge. And that's always been the intent under that DROA. That has its own implications on irrigators in the Green River and a fairly robust commercial fishery down there. Like below the dam. So there's no perfect answer in these times, but communication would help, so we'll pass that.
And I will relay back to our folks that the state wasn't asked permission, that it was, they were just told, so that they don't get beat up. Oh, and then, I got some questions about federal money. You know, what are the federal infrastructure dollars? How are any of them gonna be spent in our county? And I wanted to follow up on that. That was on the minds of our commissioners. And then a couple times the situation in Somerset with their domestic water supply is in flux. I think there are issues, water quality issues and steps that are being taken, but that comes up periodically. And then of course the situation on the Crystal River. So kind of the other side of the county, those issues seem to be hanging out there, and I need to get more up to speed on those and see what I can do to be helpful. The River District is on top of both of those already. So that's kind of what I heard from our folks. We have a lot of transition going on. If you drive into Gunnison, our whole eastern entrance is now torn up because it's being developed. It's a big development, Dick Bratton's development. Yeah, so everything as you come in now is there's a lot of work for all the guys that have heavy equipment, put it that way.
Amazing that property's not all wetlands.
Oh, they're pumping like mad. They can't get it dried out. That's all. Thank you.
So not really too much to report from Delta County. We've, harvest is winding down. It's mediocre, I would say, on both hay crops and fruit crops. Didn't have a great year, but it wasn't as bad as we feared. We have had really good moisture over the late summer and so far in the early fall. The mountains around here and into Delta County are muddy, actually, in places, something we haven't seen for a year or two. So that's a good thing. I guess one concern, there's nothing really the River District can do about it, or even the individuals, but it is going to have an impact, particularly on our community funding project. Inflation is killing us. We're seeing huge increases in everything we use for production in agriculture, but also in pipe prices. And it's really affected projects that are already granted, but they don't have enough money to actually pay for the things that they proposed. They just can't afford the pipe costs. So it's going to be an ongoing issue, and it's way higher than 3% or whatever the official inflation rate is. But as I say, not much we can do about it, but stand by. Otherwise, I'd like to thank the River District staff and board. It's been a great privilege to serve on this board. I'm not going to be reappointed for my next term. I'm stepping down. So
Can we vote?
yeah, actually, no, it's a mutual agreement between the county and myself. I'm happy to have served the number of years that I have. This is the best board and most useful board I've ever served on. So I hope it continues to do the great work it has done and be an apolitical and conscientious group that really helps the Western Slope. Thanks.
We're gonna really miss you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, Director Machard.
Grand County, I guess we better feel fortunate we're up there. Where Eastern County is the wettest spot in the district, we'll take that at this point in time. The west end is certainly dry still, but it's interesting how 1 to 2 inches of rain can change your drought status so much. That just goes to show we are high desert. And we need to recognize that probably more than what we do. The ground moisture is still not there. I'm not for sure how we move these drought statuses down, but we have, and that's for a guy that's on the ground all the time. I just don't see that, but that's what they want to do, so that's fine. The Windy Gap Connectivity Channel, they're in the final engineering stages right now. This fall, they're looking at approval through the winter, and they're going to start the project in the spring of 2022. With that, I'd really like to thank the River District Board for the $1 million to help with that. The project's still short, roughly $3 million, but talking with Ed Moyer, Grant County's manager, they feel that they're going to come up with this money in time for the project. Probably the same concern in the sense that this project, I believe, has increased $5 to $6 million since the original RCPP grant came in. They've got to get going on it, or otherwise the project will become cost prohibitive probably. On the other part of that RCPP grant, the IBLK, the irrigators in the vicinity of Lower Colorado down through there, they're continuing their work. I believe they're working currently right now. They'll be in the Colorado River for about another 3 weeks, completing projects there. The other thing, the county has a drought preparedness program committee now. They've been working on this for about the last 2 years. COVID really kind of slowed it down because at that point in time, they couldn't meet in person, and it really hindered their progress on that. But it was passed this year, and continue to move forward. They've issued a couple actions already in terms of the drought and set stage levels in the county. There'll be 3 stage levels and stuff. Don't necessarily know from a ag perspective if we agree quite with their approach on this. We were invited to the table, but a lot of us sat out on it simply because of the fact that we are limited by prior appropriations doctrines and stuff like that. But they are starting to get a few organizations and municipalities to sign in on this, which we feel in the county in the long run will help us with these programs when we approach Denver or Northern to say, we're cutting back. We're doing what we feel is necessary to reduce our consumptive use. What are you guys doing in exchange? So there's some positive things going on in the county and stuff. I guess that's the biggest end of it. The other thing, Wolford being full all summer, considering the status of the other reservoirs this year, there was tremendous use there at the reservoir, and I think the recreational side of that, and that was just fantastic. It looks a little rough now; it's been drained down, but that's where it should be, and that was the purpose behind the water and stuff. And we truly appreciate it from the West End.
Thank you very much. Director Ely, we haven't forgotten you. If you would like to make a report from Picken County, that would be great.
Good morning. Thanks, Marty. Well, the news in Picken County is fairly positive. Sales tax revenues are up about 70% on the year so far. That's up again from the previous year. Property values are through the roof, although they're a fiction. And as a consequence, the Healthy River and Streams Fund that is managed by the county is on a quick uptake. And we're looking to expand our work and our endeavors through that program in the coming years before things change, I guess. The difficult profile for us right now to manage are the releases and bypasses coming out of Twin into the upper Colorado or the upper Roaring Fork. The dilemma is not only predicting weather, soil conditions, the amount of runoff on any given year, but also the sequencing of other reservoirs in the system. It throws the cameo call on and off. This year it rockered on and off a few times and presents some problems. So coordinating coordinating our efforts with every other facility manager, I think is high on our list of objectives for the coming years. Other than that, you know, the profile in Pitkin still remains oriented toward preservation of senior water rights through conservation efforts of ranching land, the ranching land that's left in our jurisdiction, as well as preserving the use of land, of the water on the land that it's pertinent to. That effort has been going on for some time, but we've been increasing that with the revenues coming into our open space and trails fund, because we can use those assets to try to preserve large tracts of land and to lock water rights onto that land so that it cannot be independently transferred. That has been going on for a while, and we're looking to continue that in the next coming 2 to 3 year window to try to address some of the few remaining large tracts of land and associated water rights. So the endeavors are proceeding apace, and as long as we don't catch a fire from one summer to the next, we're hanging on. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, John.
Eagle County.
Yes, Eagle County Director Chandler Henry.
Thank you. Transportation issues continue to be big for us, which is water related with the mudslides in the Glenwood Canyon. So not sure how this winter is going to go with Hemden Pass and Pitkin closing and Cottonwood Pass and Eagle closing. We'll be sending everybody up your way if the road closes. So that's big dollars. Even doing some minor repairs to Cottonwood Pass, we think will be about $15 million. So that's a big issue. We are also trying to figure out what in the infrastructure bill might apply to water issues in Eagle County. We suffered with the drought. Community Water Plan is trying to do a lot of modeling to take a look at what's happening in our streams. Our ag community had a lot of cattle sell off just because of limited feed and high cost of hay. We had an interesting event. We've been trying for years to push that connection between development and water, between land planning and water planning. And we finally had our first development proposal that came through, and our water provider presented a full picture of what will happen to their reserves if they serve this project, which was just incredibly valuable. So put it in the hands of the policymakers. Here's our water, here's our reserves, here's what happens if you approve this project. So it was shocking for people to see that direct connection, but really useful, I think. The other thing that water provider is doing, which is Eagle River Water and Sand, is looking at, they're calling it a reclaiming project, and they're looking at overuse of water, mainly in these big high-end developments that are approved to irrigate, say, 7,000 square feet domestic irrigation, landscaping, and are doing far more than that. They think there is 300 acre feet of water out there that shouldn't be used, that could be back in the reserve. So that'll be interesting to see how that progresses. And then the other big issue for us is Whitten Reservoir. Lots of interest and concern about that.
Thank you. Uray County has gotten some first snowfall. Mount Abrams has snow on it, and Cleopatra and all of the Owl Creek Pass area, as well as, of course, the Holt and the range, and things are looking promising for ski season in Telluride, I would say. So that's been good. We've gotten a fair amount of moisture this fall. We are working still very hard on getting our water rights decree finished in our case, but we've made some really great progress. CWCB has just worked really, really hard with us, and we've still got some work to do, but Rob Beal and his team have just really been very, 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 very open to some discussions on how to accomplish their needs in a way that maybe is mutually beneficial. So we've been very pleased with that, and we are very close to having an agreement with Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association that will make the decree much simpler. And so we're working on that. Like everyone else, quite a few of the businesses in town are having trouble staffing. We still have quite a few tourists in the area. The campgrounds still have quite a few people in them. We've just got a lot of people kind of still on the streets. And increasingly, you'll see people kind of going, well, is there a place open today? And a lot of the restaurants are going to a, Thursday through Sunday or Friday through Tuesday kind of thing, just because we're having trouble. They're having trouble keeping staffing at the levels they need to be open full time. So other than that, I think Erie County's in pretty good shape, and so thank you.
If I can just add a few things, I wanted to just mention, Tom alluded to this, but every year we have 5 of our directors coming up for reappointment. In January, it is our Delta, Eagle, Grand, Hinsdale, and Summit County representatives. We're all up for appointment, reappointment, however you want to look at that. We do send county commissioners and the directors a letter in late November, early December to remind them the appointment for statute must occur during the first meeting of the Board of County Commissioners in January. So we've had really anxious counties that have done it in December, and it's been deemed by certain legal counsel to be not a valid appointment. And then we've had counties wait till February to do it for some reason. But if you're one of those 5 and you want to be in touch, if you haven't, with your county commissioners, let them know what's coming. That would be great. I did want to just, as I was listening to the Uray County report, mention that Marty contributed some Uncompahgre Valley water to our seminar by personally hauling a keg from Uray Brewery for our happy hour. It had been donated by Uray Brewery, and Marty, I can tell you, has a husband who's an engineer who strapped that thing into the back of her car like I've never seen. It was really impressive. It only required one night to get it out, but I just appreciate the community support on that. It was, as you know, it's our policy not to use district money on alcohol, but for very limited circumstances. And so Marty was able to help us out there and help the brewery there. I do appreciate it. The one other thing I wanted to say, Director McGinnis, you mentioned the Tmdl issue. As is consistent with our practice, what we're going to do is staff will investigate probably a team, Mike Eitel and peripherally, and then I think Jason is able to do it. Look into what role the district can and should be playing down there. We have an internal staff analysis for new projects. We go through just to understand what kind of resources we need to devote to that, and where those resources will come from, what departments. So we'll do that over the next month or so. We'll be in touch with you and the staffers down there and legal counsel down there to really understand where we can bring the most impact. There's a policy on that is that, I'm going to stretch on this, but I think if we're over $50,000 in staff time, I will need to bring it back to this board in January to get clearance, but we can get moving on that. I just want the board to remember when we have new projects of significant level, we do this analysis so that we can, it's really a tool to help me allocate staff resources. And I know you're new, and so we hadn't talked about that. I just wanted to make sure you knew that that's what we'll be doing in response to the request. If there's any direction to the contrary from the board on that, let me know, but that's where I intend to go.
I would just suggest, given the fact that the White River is being the same issue, it might not be a bad idea. See whether the Water Quality Control Commission is doing some sort of statewide Tmdl initiative. I mean, see if it's part of some bigger thing that they're doing that we're all going to get caught up in, because if it is, then we should know, because it'll hit the Gunnison, it'll hit the Uncompadre. Yeah.
So not directly TDMLs, but I think we do need to be paying close attention to water quality issues. It's something we haven't really elevated in the past, although Mike has done a really good job of keeping track of some of it. It can be a huge issue in our case with reservoir construction or rehabilitation. We have to get permits if it's going to impact water quality below the reservoir, sediment loading, that sort of thing, or minerals in the reservoirs. We've had cases where Paonia Reservoir is accused of being the source of, in fact, for Somerset, of some of the minerals that are in their drinking water. So it's a big issue. I think we probably need to be teeing it up a little more than we have.
Just to follow that up a little bit, there was some discussion about optic and algae and algae and the rest. And so, man, somehow I agree with Director Alvey too. I think we need to stay on top of this thing as a regional perspective, because we're all having the same thing. And Alvin has the blooms running down the White River. Now we had our Stagecoach Reservoir classified as an impaired water. I mean, really. And so, but it's had algae since it was first built, you know? So I don't understand, and I don't know, I'm struggling. And I'm struggling that all of us go out and do the same damn studies, and we probably have the same damn problems, and then figure out how we can do this more regionally and figure out how we can pull things together. Because what's happening, I mean, maybe there might be a little bit of different scheme in some of the chemicals that are in there, but for the most part, I mean, now, especially when we're having climate change, global warming, and hotter waters and the rest, it's just a perfect environment for all this stuff. So I don't know. And again, I echoed Director Alvey's comments. We you know, we've always been working on quantity of water. You know, maybe it's, you know, and again, I'm fine. I like to do things right. So I think that if we can figure out how we can address some of that water quality, and especially the green algae and the toxin, you can't even walk your dog out into the reservoir. And, you know, I'll take my dog out there, but she's a survivor, but. Anyhow, so I just do think we need to keep that on our radar screen, how we figure out how we might be able to address it, so.
Well, our study is wrapping up here. We're hoping to have it wrapped up by the end of this year, but you guys had some initial sampling that kind of flagged the final report on the algae analysis. So I know there's some tails that we're probably going to get from there as well. So
I think those are all good points, and I just think, I know that I haven't been really keeping up with what the Water Quality Control Commission's doing recently, but I do know that in the past, they've suddenly had sort of either a new statewide standard or new statewide rule that comes and grabs everybody on the water rights side. So it's probably something that if our staff has the ability to do a little bit of checking to see what's going on, it'd be useful, I think, for all of us.
We can save you time. I mean, just have your staff call. We do have some in-house.
Yep.
Perfect call down there. Save you a lot of time.
Will do.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much, everybody, for the great reports. And now we will move on to the community funding partnership. Amy, thank you. This is your first go at all of this, and ours too. So this is, I'm really this kind of a level, so that's great. Amy, I was going to suggest your memo has reference to 4 projects. And all of your staff recommendations are at the beginning, which is great. What I was going to suggest is maybe let's take them project by project, discuss and adopt staff recommendation or some other motion and do them one by one. Is that all right?
Absolutely. All right, well, good morning. Again, Amy Moyer, I'm going to take us through agenda item number 10 with the Community Funding Partnership. Like Director Whitmore mentioned, we have 4 projects up for board action this morning. So my plan is to go through some quick program updates, give you an overall snapshot of our funding summary of what we funded to date, including the staff recommendations before you today. Just a quick note about the 4 projects that we have. It's in total of $780,000 in recommended funding. And I just want to note that we have 4 projects with geographic diversity across our district. So we're going to go over a project in the Gunnison Basin, the Yampa, the Colorado, and the White. 3 projects that are implementing projects recommended from a stream management plan or an irrigation management plan, and then 1 project that's addressing storage needs that have been studied in the White River Basin since 2013. So for some quick program updates, these are all in your board memo, but we did reach a milestone of awarding over $2 million in funding across 18 projects, which I think that one of the most important pieces here is that we're leveraging over $30 million in additional funding, all on the west slope, all within our district. It's an important achievement for us, just given our goal of being a catalyst for funding. And it's especially exciting that we have this accomplishment as we're nearing the 1st anniversary of the passage of ballot question 7A. In terms of some of our focus since the last board meeting, we've been working towards our outreach, both again with virtual pre-application meetings, in-person events and site visits, just making sure that we are a presence across our district and counties and working with projects on the ground. So we've been really focused on getting out to the sites when we can to go see these projects in person. One of the other pieces that you'll see soon is we want to tell the stories of these projects and more importantly, the people behind them. So we've been working with a video production crew, and you'll hear a little bit more about them in our external affairs updates. But we spent 2.5 days on the road, starting in Mesa County, down into Delta and Gunnison County, visiting 6 of our funded projects and doing interviews with over 17 people. So we're going to hope to put out at least a short video on the anniversary of ballot question 7A passing. Again, be a good anchor point to work with our district constituents and tell them what we're doing with these funds. And then the last piece is we learned a lot in the first year of administering this program, working with projects. And so we're collecting a lot of lessons learned as we go. And so in January, depending on our time on our board agenda, I'd like to bring just a few of our administrative pieces to the board to do sort of a retrospective look back, see what's working for our projects and our constituents to make sure that this program is nimble and achieving the goals that we want it to do. So quick funding summary, this table is in your board packet, but with awarded projects in 2021, including the 4 projects up for action today, we will have awarded just about $2.8 million in funding through 2021. There is 1 project that we did include as part of our general manager's authority, an award to the Great Northern Water Conservancy District for a lower Yampa augmentation study. We just finalized that last week. It's a $30,000 project that we did approve through our general manager authority. It will be updated to this table and added to our website. You can also see the split between what we've approved under general manager's authority and then what again is up for board approval today, or has been approved in previous board meetings. And just a reminder that all of our funded projects, you can find short descriptions of them on our website. We have a project map, both for yourselves and then for any constituents that might be curious as to what we funded. But with that, I'm going to jump into our first board action item number 1, and I'll take them individually. Director Whitmore, as I suggested. We're going to fix the online, but I will keep moving. So our first project up for board action is the Stewart Mesa Ditch Diversion and Improvement Project. The applicant is the Stewart Mesa Ditch and Reservoir Company. They are asking for $200,000 from our community funding partnership funds, with a total project cost of just over $700,000. So the Stewart Mesa Ditch, again, located in Delta County, it's the second largest agricultural water provider in the North Fork Valley. It serves 243 water users across farms, ranches, and orchards on the south side of the valley and largely upstream of the Paonia area. The ditch receives water from the North Fork of the Gunnison with numerous water rights, including 4 that were adjudicated prior to 1922. The existing diversion is antiquated and problematic for the water users served by the ditch. I have a few pictures on the next slide that I'll show. It's also problematic for recreational uses on the river, and including problematic for fish, including native fish species. This was identified as a priority project as part of a stream management plan, more specifically an irrigation management plan that was completed in 2017 that identified this again as an important project to improve the diversion structure and head gate on the ditch. The project includes construction of a more permanent weir, replacement of the head gate works, debris and fish screens, and installation of 2 SCADA-ready gates for that diversion structure. They're in the midst of design. They've completed 30% design, and 70% design is expected by November of 2021. Slides to advance. So in terms of the project benefits, this project will protect the ditch from flooding. It will improve controls on the diversion structure, reduce erosion, and eliminate safety hazards for boaters. And it will also improve the habitat and population resiliency for fish populations. So you can see in this top photo that the head wall is improperly sized, so it's susceptible to flooding and requires sandbags to prevent some of the overtopping that you can see. This is a project where the Stewart Mesa Ditch and Reservoir Company is working hand in hand with Trout Unlimited, and the project has been designed from the get-go to support the water users on the ditch. So that includes engineers that have surveyed the existing ditch along the river. They're incorporating the water supply needs into the hydraulic modeling. The stakeholders are planning to oversize the debris and fish screens as well as the diversion gates to make sure that they are working properly at both high flow and low flow events, and to ensure that there's no limiting to the access of the water. Again, this is a project that was recommended from their stream management plan process. The Colorado Cattlemen's Association is also closely tracking this project, again, to support future diversion structure improvements that are identified in that plan. I think there are over 12 diversion structures in this area that are also in need of some improvements. And so this is a project that will help showcase and provide a lot of lessons learned in terms of improvements that can be accomplished in a way that supports our recreation community, our fish population, and importantly, the water users on the ditch. So in terms of the staff recommendation, we do recommend a grant of $200,000 for this project, and have allocated the project across actually all 5 of our project categories. So I'll pause here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, Director Alvey.
Just like to say that from North Fork perspective, this is a really good project. North Fork Water Conservancy District and the Western Slope Conservation Center jointly sponsored a stream management plan that identified this, and as Amy says, several more headgate improvements that are needed on the main stem of the North Fork. And this is going to be a project that should attract a lot of positive attention to show other ditch companies how this can work and the benefits that can come from it. Are we going to?
And so is this a motion?
Yeah, well, that was my question. Are we
Yes.
doing
We're
those? in
doing an
phase one?
individual.
I would move approval of staff recommendation.
Second.
Second, motion by Albee, second by Richard.
Just
Yes.
have a quick question. So what's the CFS on this ditch? They have 243 users. So,
So that's.
3 CFS.
Yeah. Very efficient. Very efficient in Delta County. I know it.
I don't know if I have the answer on the top of my head for this ditch unless Director Albee has.
All right,
It's around 50.
50.75 CFS 1904, 7.04.
okay, you got it. Thank you.
Well,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you for the assistance, Director Vandenbrink.
All right, further questions or discussion?
It's coming to us.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Wonderful. We have the project approved.
I just have one question, not about this project, but just in general terms. Some of the funding for this project, and I noticed for several of the others, is not on board yet. What's our direction in cases where a project that we would approve funding for and then they don't get funded from their other sources?
Traditionally, our funding award is contingent upon commitments and funding from other agencies.
Yeah, and I might answer that in two different ways. I think, again, as we've worked through the first year of this program, we see our dollars be impactful in a couple different ways. And one is being a catalyst for being a matching source or providing that support to get these matching dollars and be competitive in these matching programs. And so I think this is a project that merits some consideration of, again, approving it now so that they are competitive to receive these additional sources. When we do contract, we have a disbursement policy where we disperse payments in a progress form. So again, our funding is contingent upon the progress progressing, securing the match to get started. But just to loop back, and then the other benefit that we're seeing, and you'll see in some of these projects, is being the last dollar in or helping with these cost overruns that these communities are facing and weren't anticipating. And so there's a couple different avenues as to how the board might consider when is appropriate to do these approvals. And we try and make sure on the staff end that we're supportive that these projects are ready to come to the board. Okay, thank you. So our second project up for board action is from the city of Steamboat Springs. It's for the Yampa River Forest Restoration Project. The request amount is for $150,000. This project aims to restore the mid and upper canopy tree reaches on the upper Yampa River to help reduce the summer temperatures on the river. And so this project, again, arose out of the city of Steamboat Springs Stream Management Plan in 2018, which identified the benefits of tree planting to reduce the solar loads on the river. The plan noted that over 80% of the upper and middle Yampa has degraded riparian forests sections along the river, and also noted that supplemental flows alone are not going to save and reduce the temperatures to below what is current water quality standards. Hence the project to look at tree planting as a way to prepare the Yampa River for a hotter and drier future for these increased temperatures, again, to reduce the solar load on the river. This project will focus on city and state-owned lands outside of the city and also within Route County. Another feature that we worked with the applicant on is piloting riparian plantings on private lands, working closely with the NRCS and the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust to identify private lands that are suitable for the tree planting and also have a benefit to shading the river. In addition to the stream management plan, the city has worked with the Freshwater Trust, which is an organization out of Oregon that specializes in quantifying the benefits of these conservation practices and ecosystem services. And they identified 372 potential project sites, over 794 acres that would be suitable for planting that would have a reduction in the thermal load in the critical months of July and August. So far, the city has piloted these planting methods over the past 2 years with approximately 500 cottonwoods planted. The trees are raised from Yampa Valley clippings. They're raised by the Colorado State Forest Service nursery. In terms of the project benefits, the goals are over a 3-year period to have 6 acres of new riparian plantings across 1.5 miles of river. The project will protect our drinking water and supports healthy fish and wildlife populations. This is also an example of an example of using natural infrastructure as an innovative approach to mitigating increases in temperature, again, preparing the river for the impacts that it will continue to see. Again, the River District's contribution is intended to support the tree plantings both on public lands owned by the city and county, but also on the private lands. So again, we are recommending the funding over a 3-year period, which will help in the outreach for the landowners by showing that we have these commitments. It will give us the lead time to try and have the private landowner commitments in year 2 and 3 of this program. There are numerous letters of support for this project from the Routt County Board of County Commissioners, the City of Steamboat Springs, Colorado State Forest Service, Parks and Wildlife, the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, NRCS, the Yampa River System Legacy Partnership, and Friends of the Yampa. I will note we have worked with the applicant on the risks to this project of monitoring and needing to maintain these riparian plantings. So the project budget does include fencing, weed barriers, irrigation supplies to protect the longevity of these trees. The fencing is intended to protect from both cattle grazing where it's present and also to beaver damage along the river. Staff has also discussed with the applicant as we look towards suitable sites for tree planting on private lands that we that they have binding commitments again for the maintenance of these trees. Our staff recommendation is to approve this grant for $150,000, attributing the project to productive agriculture and the majority to healthy rivers and watershed health and water quality.
Yes, Director Kirk.
Thank you. So did anybody look at depletions to the creek from additional riparian planning and whether that causes injury to anybody downstream?
We did discuss that with the applicant and did acknowledge in our memo that with any increase in riparian vegetation, there's a potential for reduced return flows to the river. We did talk about that with our technical staff. The recommendation from staff was that we would expect the increased consumptive use to be minimal and some of the benefits of reduced solar loading to likely outweigh any impact from the additional riparian vegetation and potentially reduce evaporative losses into the future. So we did have that discussion, and that was, part of our rationale for still approving this grant. But you'll know we do ask that question on our application. It is part of our staff analysis. It's certainly something we look at.
Yes, well, Director.
If you ask the applicant that, of course, they're gonna say things look good, but what about downstream water users? Are they aware of this and has anything come up to any concerns, off that ground? How do you?
Well, I guess
Yes, Director Munger.
I'll input a little bit. I think we're gonna learn by doing,
Okay.
and they have water, the city has water in Stagecoach Reservoir, so that becomes an issue that we think is an issue, and I think we can ask them to start releasing some of their water. They're doing this in lieu of, and I'm sure the applicant's probably on the Zoom as well. Mr. Sullivan is working, kind of leading this project with the Sustainability Council on behalf of the city, but you know, they're doing this project to eliminate the need for a huge sewer plant expansion and or renovation because of the temperatures being distributed back to the upper river after it's been processed. So if we can keep more flow in the river, it'll keep the river chillier, colder. And they believe, I don't know, I'm not that smart, but they believe that if we have that much more tree cover on it, it won't increase temperatures because of the sun hitting it as much. And so especially during that section at the base of Rabbiter's Pass all the way to Steamboat there, and it's been pretty developed as well. You know, when I have to laugh about the references, the United Beaver Alliance has not checked in. So, and I harassed them quite often about that, by the way. And so, hey, so no, they've included in this the fences around the trees because they just, we're just feeding the beavers. It's a great thing. Anyhow, I'll shut up. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this project?
Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question asked as to the wording of the motion. So
Okay.
how do we word this?
Generally speaking, we word it to adopt staff recommendation, so you don't have to read the whole thing.
Okay, so in Mesa County, I discovered a situation where we appropriated a certain amount of money. Project, not necessarily, of course, setting aside the inflation, all those things. The project came in less than that. So instead of advising us, they just reduced our burden sharing for our partners, but go ahead and stuck it with us on the original amount. So I started to ask language if we would approve something like this up to the 150,000, for example, or the percentage of 150,000 is of the original ask, whichever is less, which gives us the protection. If the project comes in less, we get a proportionate reduction as well. But we cap it so they don't say, okay, then you take a proportion of if it goes over the 150.
You're welcome to word a motion however you like.
Well, I'm just trying to see what the board's doing. I mean, maybe you already have, maybe staff already does some kind of safeguard in that regard. So in our case, it was significant dollars.
Amy, do you want to answer it?
Why don't you start? And then
Okay.
let me ask.
Great. I would say, Director McGinnis would do again, make our funding contingent upon the funding that they've also, so what's not yet confirmed. And so there are, in this particular instance, there's another $32,000 that the funds have not been committed. So we would expect that to come in before we start funding any of our money.
No downside to this, is it?
We want to treat all of our applicants the same. They say they have these funding, we're going to make our funding. One thing on this one I would say is that we actually expect the funding from others to grow significantly over this 3-year period. So right now, if I think Amy's numbers show total project cost, Amy, of what?
300.
Yeah, so this is a project that exists on annual fundraising. And so we are providing a commitment over the 3-year term. We do expect contributions to grow across this 3-year timeframe, both from the city and county, who again can only do their budgeting on an annual cycle. We do expect additional contributions from federal funding sources with conversations with the NRCS. So this is an example of where we would expect the total project cost to go in the opposite direction of increasing the amount of work that they can conduct with additional contributions from partners. And again, the River District portion is intended to be a catalyst to help support achieving some of those additional dollars for the project. One of the protections that we have in place to address the situation that you mentioned, Director McInnes, is in our disbursement policy through our contracting. So we do provide, once we contract and we feel that the project is going to get off the ground, we release 25% of the grant award upon the signature of the contract and receiving the necessary insurance certificates that we require. And then the remaining portions of the grant are essentially given out on a reimbursement basis. So we do 2 progress payments, 25% of the grant award. Once we see receipt from the project, we get an update on the project status, and then we hold the last quarter of the grant award until we see the request for final payment that includes, here's the final project costs. We would expect to work with the applicant if there was a significant reduction in the project cost on what is the appropriate amount for our award.
We have those kind of things in place too. I guess I don't understand the resistance. So Mesa County, we have the same thing. We did it in steps. And unbeknownst to us, our partners, the project was reduced. We didn't verify what amount they contributed. We just ran it through the typical, this is approved up to this amount. That's how, kind of by accident, I discovered that the project in our process didn't cover that kind of language. Caps up to 150. The project goes higher, you don't have that risk. It also protects you on as a percentage of what you originally approved. So it comes in less. So you have whichever is less, but you also have the cap. I mean, Andy, if you go on the policy, well, we treat everything the same, then I guess you'll never change anything because you've already had previous approvals. So, Director Gray.
I think you're raising a valid point, but what I'm hearing Amy say, I feel like they are addressing it because of the 25% at the end where they verify this is the final payment and this is the final cost of the project. And they don't release that final 25%. Is that right? Until the final cost of the project is tabulated. It seems like I see what you're saying and I agree with you 100%, but I think they're doing it. Am I wrong?
We haven't had any projects so far that are completely closed out to date, but as part of our request for final payment, we have a form that's typical to how the River District handled previous grants through the grant program prior to this, that requires the information of all invoices for the project. It requires that final payment or final project cost. It requires all of the photos and deliverables for the project as part of the contracting and final closeout.
Yeah, so in that instance, what that would catch, I mean, it's designed to catch exactly the situation where it sounds like Mesa County gained, and that if the final project cost is less than what was represented at the beginning, and others have not contributed their funds as represented, our final payment would not be made. So because they don't have the total cost of the project doesn't equal what they said it was. Now, most of those projects will actually come in over what they originally said, and so we would fund that. But that's why we had that previously in our small grant program. As carried over. I mean, by the way, I mean, the board can approve it however it wants. One of the things that we're trying to do is maintain what I think you're shooting for, and we wholly endorse, is accountability to our taxpayers and how we spend the money and making sure that we're truly leveraging it. We also want to create a program that is not unduly burdened by rules and bureaucracy, because we found federal and state programs that where we're co-funding these, or where in the past or currently we are applicants to, the rules and the bureaucracy that come along with it create a situation where the programs are not nimble. They can't fund things quickly. They can't get the money out the door at the time that it's needed by the constituents. I think about the overhead that we expend, for instance, Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart Grant, that literally is hundreds of hours of accounting and administrative time in order to take the money from the federal government onto that project. But we're constantly trying to balance that. As I said, I think we've covered it at the staff level, but if you want to direct us otherwise, please do.
My Madam Chair. So, I mean, first of all, that's a typical excuse you hear when we come on accountability. Oh, trust us, or this is creating a burden for us, and so on and so forth. It's mentioned more susceptible. This isn't going to create any kind of burden. If your invoice covers it, if you wouldn't mind, just send me a copy of the invoice and take a look at it and all with. I mean, I think you've got it covered fine, but.
All right, do
People
we have a
aren't always
motion?
getting mad at the chair. I think. It's not beyond people getting the system, even our partners, even somewhat innocent. So that's the only reason I brought it up. I just want to make sure that we have a double check on it. If we do, fine.
We completely agree with you that it's not beyond any of our funding partners to potentially be in the system. Agree that we should be out of the district.
Is there a motion on this or further discussion?
I would move staff's recommendation.
Second. Moved
Second.
and seconded. And any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
All right, our third project up for board action is from the town of Carbondale for the Crystal River Restoration at Riverfront Park. The request amount was for $247,262 with a total project cost of a little over 1.4 million. This is a project, again, from the stream management plan that will restore and enhance a half a mile and 18-acre reach along the Crystal River that is currently severely degraded and identified again as a priority project through the Crystal River Management Plan. This stretch of the river flows through the town of Carbondale at Riverfront Park near the Crystal River Bridge. At low flows, and again, I'll show a few pictures on the next slide. The river is currently a wide, shallow ripple, which impedes fish passage and creates high temperature, warm water conditions. Along this stretch of river is the Weaver Ditch, which is owned by the town of Carbondale. It's a prominent feature in river feature, which is in large part what is creating some of the conditions, given the need to create a push-up dam to maintain water deliveries into the Weaver Ditch. What's happening is the push-up dam results in cobble deposits downstream during high flows, which again widens the channel and erodes the surrounding banks. So this project includes both improvement to the Weaver Ditch to allow for water deliveries, but also to ensure that the Weaver diversion functions as a stable part of the stretch of the Crystal River. So in addition to upgrade the Weaver Ditch, the project will focus on additional in-channel work to provide connectivity at a wide range of flows. Again, this is an area that the Crystal River can go down to about 4 CFS or 4,000 CFS during runoff. So it's being engineered again to operate at this wide range of flows. While this is not a portion of the project that our river district funds will go towards, the project is also including some accessible trails, interpretive signage, and some outdoor classrooms to provide educational opportunities along the Crystal River and to provide access where there is really limited river access in the town of Carbondale. I will mention the construction timeline was originally slated for this November. That is getting moved into the next year, working closely with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to ensure that the construction schedule doesn't impact spawning for whitefish. So the project partners are working closely with CPW as we speak to come up with an agreement what's best for those construction windows. In terms of project benefits, and again, here's some of the pictures where you can see just the widening of the channel, losing sort of the depth. There is no thalweg in this stretch, so intending to restore this section of the river to create a self-sustaining remote river channel. This, again, is meant to be a functional pilot to show the resiliency for modernizing aging infrastructure to be able to handle the swings in hydrology that we're expecting, both given the impacts of low flows and high flows into the future. It's a good example of collaboration between the town of Carbondale working to upgrade their municipal water needs, along with stream and riparian restoration. Again, this is an example of actually implementing a stream management plan. So we're seeing some of these projects get underway after they've had the community involvement, community support to identify these priority projects. It's great to see some of them moving forward. This is an example where we are largely the last dollar into the project. So I may just move and give a little bit of context to our staff recommendation. We are recommending partial funding for this award of $100,000 to offer our river district support. We do think it's a beneficial project for the region. Our partial funding also acknowledges some conversations with both the applicant and the Colorado Water Conservation Board, who is, as it has issued their intent that they will provide the additional funding for construction next year through the water plan grant program and through a December 1 grant round. So we're limiting our contribution from the river district to $100,000. But should the water plan grant not fully fund the amount needed for construction next fall, we have to work with the applicant to come back and discuss any additional funding with us. So again, we recommend partial funding in $100,000 for this project, allocated across our infrastructure, healthy rivers, watershed health and water quality, and conservation and efficiency categories.
Okay, is there discussion or a motion? Yes, Director Kirk.
Thank you. So the partial funding recommendation, will that allow the project to continue to move forward still?
That is our expectation, is that the partial funding will still allow the project to move forward. We have, our understanding is that the water plan grant program will be able to fund the additional need. And if it doesn't, again, the hope is that we would bring it back likely in our spring board meeting to make sure that it's fully funded.
So at this time, let me just be clear. So at this time, you're recommending $100,000 partial. If the project were to need more, you would be bringing that back for a separate decision, correct?
We would have discussions with the applicant first as to
Got it.
those sources, but that would be the expectation, and we included that in the board memo.
Director Chandler.
Yes, I just had a question along the same lines. It shows a budget of 1.46 million and revenues of 837,000 and plus our 100,000, I guess 937. So there's a gap there. It would be helpful maybe just to show total revenues, so it's easy to see what that gap is and where that's coming from, and on all of these, not just this one in particular, but to get a bigger picture of both sides of the revenue and the budget.
Absolutely.
Director Munger.
So I'm just a little confused here. So what are we really doing here? So I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so what are we gonna do to the river channel?
Well, the river channel,
So it's wide,
right.
so they naturally collapse themselves through growth and the rest. So are we replacing the head gate here? I seen that was part of it.
Right, so
And-
we're replacing the head gate, we're eliminating the need to bring equipment into the river to do the push-up dam that's needed annually at this
Okay,
point.
that
We'll
helps.
be armoring the banks so
Yep.
that, right, the cobbles don't continue to wash down a road and widen the channel.
Okay,
The intent is to put the thalweg back into the channel, allow the Weaver ditch to be a more naturally functioning portion. So there's both,
So ripple and pool and all those kind of good things.
right, so both improvements to the Weaver ditch and then in-channel work to restore the river, along with the upland improvements of the paths and outdoor classroom. And so it's a very large holistic project to ensure that this stretch of the river has some longevity, and we're not back here in a couple of years with it re-widening.
No, that sounds good. I appreciate your response to that. I guess my comment kind of mirrors Director McGinnis's comments. And so this is the design build probably. And so we'll see it again, potentially.
I will say,
This is committing $100,000 right now.
correct. This project has completed its design, again, was ready to go to construction. The issue that came up was working with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who had some new concerns on whitefish spawning. So essentially, this is as close to a shovel-ready project as we would probably bring to the board. The issue is that Colorado Parks and Wildlife wants to make sure, given the impacts to whitefish across the state, that they can identify a construction window that they're comfortable with. So we are working with the project applicants. We're still supportive of the project. We expect that they'll resolve these construction window concerns with CPW. I think the only, there are contingencies built into the project budget. So the only concern would be what Director Alvey mentioned, is just what's hard to predict what's going to happen from an inflation perspective and cost of materials. But I don't expect the project budget to swing dramatically, given that the design is essentially complete for this.
Thank you.
Director Alba.
I move approval of staff recommendation.
Motion by Alvin, is there a second? Second. Second by Chandler Henry. Further discussion? Yeah. Were you raising? your
No,
hand?
ma'am, sorry.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Okay, motion passes.
So the last project for board action is from the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District. It is for the Wolf Creek Reservoir Project to assist with project permitting needs. The request amount was $3 million across 3 years, with the total project cost expected to range in the $6 to $10 million range. So again, since 2013, the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy has conducted planning work for a water storage project within the White River Basin. In January of this year, a 2014 conditional water rate of 66,720 acre feet was awarded for the project for the following beneficial uses: supporting municipal augmentation or municipal use, augmentation use, mitigation of environmental impacts, hydroelectric power generation, recreation, piscatorial, and wildlife habitat. This conditional water rate identifies 2 reservoir locations, one location on Wolf Creek, which is an ephemeral stream that flows into the lower White River, and one location on the main channel of the White River. The Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District has identified the Wolf Creek Dam located on Wolf Creek as the preferred location due to considerations related to environmental and private land impacts. This reservoir would be filled through a pump station on the White River, which would require about a half-a-mile long pipeline to convey the water to the reservoir. It's expected that water would be pumped from the White River during periods when existing water needs are met for both water users and endangered fish flow targets, and mainly during the spring runoff period. The applicant expects to move into federal permitting early next year, and based on pre-permitting conversations, it is always difficult to estimate exactly the cost of these permitting efforts, but the applicant did do some work on looking at similar water supply projects in Colorado and the West to try and anticipate what those permitting costs will be. They've estimated about $1 to $2 million per year to conduct the National Environmental Policy Act, so the NEPA analysis required for the right-of-way permit to construct reservoir on BLM land, it would be expected that the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, would be the lead federal agency for the permitting process. Again, also would need a Clean Water Act individual 404 permit through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and then additional local and state permits related to impacts to fish and wildlife or Endangered Species Act compliance would also be required. Again, it's also difficult to determine how long a permitting process will take. The applicant expects a 3 to 5 year permitting timeline, totaling about 6 to 10 million in permitting costs, based on, again, the costs and experiences of recent water supply projects. Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District will be supporting the permitting process with a commitment of $250,000 per year, which I believe is a significant portion of their budget. I believe it's over half of their annual project budget. They're in the process of securing additional commitments from Rio Blanco County and also the town of Rangeley, who are working towards those commitments as part of their annual budgeting process. In terms of the project benefits, the project will provide new storage and protect water supplies in the White River Basin. It will provide sustainable drinking water supplies to the town of Rangeley, and augmentation water for farmers and ranchers during periods of administration per their decree. The applicants will be required through a Section 7 consultation process through the Endangered Species Act to review the project. And so the applicant does anticipate discussions regarding a reservoir pool that would mitigate impacts to endangered fish along the White River Basin and the Upper Colorado region. In terms of partners and support, we did get significant support from our local elected officials in that area. So we did receive letters from the Moffat County Board of County Commissioners, the Rio Blanco Board of County Commissioners, the town of Rangeley, and also the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District. I do want to walk through our approach here for a staff recommendation. We are recommending a partial funding award of $330,000 from the Community Funding Partnership. And so partial funding in this project recognizes the importance of storage. It recognizes and acknowledges the strong letters of support from our local elected officials in the area. This recommendation also recognizes that water supply projects are complex. They are unique and they create impacts to the inundated and surrounding lands and impacts to the hydrologic conditions. And so we are supportive of the need for project permitting and the need to analyze the effects of the project. And so we do support an inclusive and collaborative permitting process supported by data and responsive to public feedback. We've had great conversations with the applicants on sort of our mutual desire for this approach. We also support the need for a robust review of alternatives, including reservoir sizing that continues to meet the water supply needs in the basin and meets what the White River Basin is looking for in terms of their storage needs. So along these lines, in terms of project success, when we're thinking about providing funds for permitting, we do also recommend that the success of this funding award be tied to reaching a permitting decision. This is what we're all trying to get to, rather than tying success or failure to the outcome of that permitting decision. So we're certainly supportive of moving towards those next steps, having that robust analysis process, working with the applicant as we identify how this storage project might meet the purpose and need of the storage needs in the White River Basin. So again, we are supporting an initial award of $330,000. We have talked with the applicant and have encouraged the applicant to come back to us as the permitting process progresses, as these additional commitments from local partners are secured, particularly as the permitting process continues in a manner that's inclusive and supported by data, collaborative and responsive to public feedback. So we would work with the applicant on those milestones, and we would expect to bring this back to the board in future years as things progress. So I will pause there and happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Director Rivera?
Thank you. So as we go through these projects, as you use the word partial funding and encourage them to come back, are we then kind of for future planning, setting aside reserve, anticipating this? So for next year, we're starting 330,000, approximately less than we. So how are we planning for this for the future, since it seemed to imply to the applicant, look, we only gave you partial, but come on back for the 3 million. We didn't say 3 million, but that's what they requested. So I would guess that the expectation has been set with the applicant. But we're reserving some of these as we go in and we say, okay, and
So
and
for
do
any,
we have a general, and I'm sorry, I'm new, but I mean, do we have a general cap of how much we're gonna put into any particular project and how that's gonna impact the balance of it for smaller applications?
sure. Those are great questions, Director McGinnis. I think in terms of the first point, for any multi-year project, we are requiring that we book the full amount in the year that it was requested. And so again, we don't have the funding amount to provide the $3 million over 3 years for this project. What we did decide on was, starting with this initial award, we don't want to commit the board now to future decisions. And so when the applicant comes back, even if we encourage them to do so, we will do the same staff analysis. We will bring it to the board. So we don't commit $330,000 for the next year or cycle, even with this encouragement. What we do as part of just managing this program is having a close eye on projects that we expect to come into our door. So we're constantly looking at our fund balance, constantly looking at what conversations have we had from a pre-application standpoint, or what conversations have we had with projects where we've said, I don't think this is quite ready. We don't have enough information to bring it to our board, but we're tracking, here's maybe our anticipated ask from this. And so that we have a global picture of, here's what might be coming our way in the next year. It is a consideration, as we've opted to operate this program on a rolling basis. So it really pushes us to have that long view of what might come into our doors, but we don't set aside or commit future boards to these decisions in terms of additional applications.
Peter, do we have parameters?
Why don't we let legal counsel weigh in?
I was just going to say that we can't commit the future funds. That would be a multi-year fiscal obligations. We can't do that. I liken Amy's explanation to more of a invitation to apply, openness for recognizing that this is a long-term process. I don't know, I won't put words in your mouth, but that seems the way to do it. In the future, the board could decide to fund something and appropriate the funds in that year and expend them in that year. The applicant doesn't necessarily have to expend them in that specific calendar year. Sure, of course, but we can't obligate.
Good, I think it's great. I just want to make sure that there's reasonable explanation to our applicants.
Yeah.
Your expectation is kind of limited here. We have to go through this process.
Director Gray and then Director Munger.
Well, I think it's a great project, and I'm in support of what my comments are, by no way questioning the validity. As we're getting this project stuff off the ground, I know the rolling average, or the rolling average is to do with the distribution of projects within the tax base of counties, so that it's reasonably fair that we're awarding grants to counties based somewhat upon the tax revenues collected. That's the intent.
It's intended to be geographically equitable, and by that meaning, I hate that word, What that really means is there are a number of factors, if you think back, or we can pull up the framework that this board approved and with respect to that. There are a number of factors, including, and one of those factors is the revenue generated by that county in our, within the context of our entire district revenue, but that's not limited to that, because we recognize that there are projects that are of district-wide importance that may be located in one county, and that county may not have significant revenues, but it's a really important project for the district from a policy perspective. And so we really do consider what that looks like. We don't intend to have our unless this board changes the policy direction, we don't intend the awards to be restricted to or match exactly what counties are putting into our annual budget, because I think that we would quickly find the ability of this board and in this district to implement its priority goals that are oftentimes, it may occur, as I said, in one county, but span the importance of the entire district. We would be hampered by that. And so it's a bit squishy.
Yeah, that's
and
that's kind of mushy.
yeah, but I think in order to maintain this board's flexibility to really target those projects that are really important, we're going to have that flexibility. And I think discussions are always appropriate about how we do that and how we're accounting for it. I will say, Amy and I are intending to bring back in January, having a full year cycle of the CFP, lessons learned, policy discussion on, hey, this is what happened this year in our first year of our project. Here's the direction you gave us. Here are some ways that we think you might want to consider improving the project, but encouraging a robust discussion among the board to make sure that where we're headed is right and where the initial limitations or structures make sense, or maybe the board says, no, this doesn't make sense. We want to change the direction of how we're doing this. The guiding issue, the guiding policy for staff is really, the original document passed by the board when the board put the ballot question on, and then the framework get approved in December. So, and I should back up. The most important is the ballot language, making sure we're spending money consistent with that. But it's those three documents that govern how we're implementing the program. We do think it's appropriate to review it on an annual basis. We have been careful not to bring policy suggestions back to the board every quarter, because I think we could spend the entire board meeting talking about it, but that's where we're coming from. And we'll refresh in detail how we go about determining geographic equity. And then a simpler equitable question or distribution question is the 5 buckets, right? Because that is approximately equal over on a 5-year running average. We're not looking at funding in the 15 counties as approximately equal over 5 years in a running average, because that would probably not allow us to achieve some of our really important policy goals.
I hear you. I just think as we're getting this off the ground, in my mind, we have to be really careful that we, years down the road, that we don't have $5 million sort of committed here and $5 million there, and our revenue is $4 million, and we don't have the ability because we've sort of first of the game of kind of what's tied up for the foreseeable future. And
I want to stress what Peter said and Amy, we have not committed any future revenue.
Multi-year.
The multi-year, a lot of our projects will take more than this year to finish. I mean, all of them, I think.
Right.
And so our grant awards pursuant to the policy the board set are expected, are all have a termination unless there's a good reason for it. Otherwise, of 3 years maximum. So if they don't expend our funds in 3 years, that money is reallocated back into the unallocated funds. But we are not telling any of these applicants that they and that they have a guarantee of funding when they come back. I mean, let's be honest about this project. If it successfully goes through this permitting project, there will be a much larger ask of this district with respect to expenses. We are not committing, we're not asking the board to commit that. We can't. And I think the applicant understands that. And that's not a position we can be in. And so I guess I would disagree with you, Director Gray, in that we are not committing 4 or 5 million here, or 2 million there, or things like that.
Fair enough. In specific terms, I know you want to move on, Marty, I can see that, but it's important but to Rio Blanco Conservancy Districts, being able to pass a straight face test with them, when they come back next year and they've gotten this preliminary stuff off the ground, it's our moral obligation to say, well, we're supporting your project and we invited you to come back. It doesn't say we have to support $3 million, but we don't want to get ourselves in a situation where we kind of overpromise, or we didn't promise IFKM, we're not committing, but there's always a moral thread running through these things that if you support it, get go, you have some moral obligation to not just cut and run.
Well, I agree with you, Director Ray, to some extent, but I would say, and this is no, I don't want to, we certainly hope for success in this project. We hope for, hey, here's where we are in the permitting process, we're making progress, and now we need some more money. Yes, that's what we hope to see. It is possible this applicant or any of these other applicants that may want more money will have the whole permitting process blow up on, and especially a permitting process. That is a one of these awful things that has so many tentacles to it that our water users have to go through. That it may something beyond our control, beyond the control of the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District may occur, and so there may not be any additional requests. I really strongly encourage the board to think about this on an application at a time basis, not as if we are committing, even though we're not committing, but we are somehow winking and nodding that we're committing funds in the future. I don't think that's what we're asking.
Director Munger.
I just want to echo what Andy's saying. I mean, every year or every time that these projects would come back around, they need to be thrown back in the pot and be reevaluated with all the rest of the projects in the pot as well. There is no preference or what, and I don't have any moral preference because we funded them in the previous year. They still have to rank out and be the best projects moving forward. So, and that might kick a project down a year too. So again, I don't think we have any, I don't feel any moral commitment. We're funded 1 year at a time and we move on.
Director Curry, Director Alvey, and then Director Chandler.
Thank you. So I'm a little torn on that notion. There's a reason why storage never gets built. It's because these conservancy districts can't plan because the entities that might be able to help them are committed to legally to 1 year annual appropriations. So I actually think that we have to bear in mind what we've invested in. If we put $330,000 into this, and it ended up being wasted money because they can't garner the funds. This is obviously not a huge tax base. It's a small outfit, but we've heard that Rangeley needs help with water supply. I totally support this concept and I understand the position we're in. But when you go and you study the project, which I know Director Vandenbrink can't comment extensively on this, but when you study the merits of the project, the Conservancy District is saying there aren't any fatal flaws right now. So I think investing in a permitting process that seems somewhat feasible is a wise investment, but I will be keeping things like this in mind when we tell an applicant to come back and thinking about next year's 4.2 million. And because I don't think it's fair to just leave them hanging completely, even though I understand how we have to budget. I get that, but I think we should keep that in mind and then think about whether investments are going to be worthwhile or not. And I see this as a worthwhile investment. It's the only way we're going to get this kind of thing going. And I think it's a great project and commend the district for being this brave.
Director Alvey.
So I don't think there's any contradiction between what Director Munger said and what Director Curry said. It is going to be on our minds if this comes back again. We have committed funding to it. That means that we've thought it's a good project. And I think that will be an influencing factor. But I think Director Munger's right. It goes into the pile. If we have applications for 100 million next year, we're not going to be able to fund everything. So we'll take all these factors into account to make the decision of which projects get funded next year. But for this year, this project makes good sense to me, and it's an appropriate level of funding. And I think it does illustrate how closely the staff is really paying attention to what we're doing with funds and the number of chances we will get to keep looking at projects. So I think the staff recommendation is good. I'll wait till after Director Chandler Henry has her say, but I'd be ready for a motion.
And I can handle it. Just a quick question. How did you come up with 330? How did you settle on that? And is that enough for them to move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, we talked about this. We normally bring in, you know, staff from our technical team. We bring in our leadership to determine these staff recommendations. We felt like this was a good amount to help Rio Blanco County commit to the BLM and help them hire that third-party contractor that they will need to start the permitting process. So this is a, you know, 1-for-1 match of at least what Rio Blanco Conservancy District is putting in, and then the additional amount, you know, can help lead to maybe a $1 million contribution in the future, or, you know, we weighed a lot of pros and cons, and it's difficult to land on the appropriate number. You know, I think a difficult piece for this project is in the permitting process. It is difficult to send us the project budget up. Here's exactly how much it's going to cost, and so here's our, you know, comfort level for the first year of funding. And so we have typically been in, you know, a range of 20 to maybe 50% of the amount of funds that the CFP is put forward. And so if we think of the first year of costing $1 million to get the permitting process underway, this is about a 30% contribution to that year one. So those were some of our considerations and how we landed on this amount, if that helps. It's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, Director.
Just one quick last comment here. So, you know, again, it's great discussion we're having. I think we're providing good direction to our staff as well. My fear with any project is that you go through and do all this analysis, and well, then you spent, you know, $1 million, $3 million, $4 million on permitting, and you come back with a project that's $250 million and to build the project. And so, man, so, and again, I've had conversations with Director Vandenbrink. It says, oh, I mean, and then they have come up with the fact that they think that they can financially pay off that and figure out how to make that construction part of it work too. I mean, we can't be funding projects for design and the rest and environmental studies when we know that we can't fund what might be a probable project. I mean, we're just throwing money down the drain. So I think all of these discussions are good, but we don't know what we don't know till we figure out what we know. So we have to head down that path and try to get more knowledge and get more things and figure out how we, and again, so in my hope in this project specifically, that it has some benefit for all of Western Colorado, all of our Colorado River District, and that's why we're investing in it, not only because it's in Rio Blanco County. So.
All really good discussion. I also want to raise one point that hasn't been raised. You can't commit a future board, not just because of the legal limitations, but the board turns over, right? And we get new people. And so there will be new people over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And so an applicant, I think, certainly comes back to the board, but that I think an applicant has to understand there's no guarantee from year to year. And you just, you know, hope for the best and for continuation of overall general policy. Did you have a final point, Director?
Well, on your point, I completely agree with you, and I just think it's very important. Give you several examples where we have in writing. Then a period of time goes by because of turnover of the commissioner board and the turnover of, in my particular case, the food bank. The agreement or the expectations seem to go a different direction. So I think it's important that when you do the grant letter, that you say, there's no guarantee this has to come back from an annual appropriation, and set it out very clearly. And in my opinion, that will more than pay for itself 3 or 4 years from now when another request comes in. So, well, then wait a minute, here's a reflection of the understanding at the time. Because it's very easy to build up expectation. I forget the legal stuff. I mean, I think everybody's aware you can't do it on link. It's that expectation. And it'll come back to bite us, especially as we turn over and the history that we know disappears. Systems get gamed, so anyway.
I think, I mean, I think
Director
this-
Gray, please.
Well, one more thing, I think Tom's right when you take a look, but this is the kind of, this first year or two of this project, we need these discussions because it is kind of mushy.
It is.
And we don't want to shy back from changing our framework or anything if we find it necessary to address the issues, the thing about tracking the cost. I think we need to flesh that out some more, and the idea of how are we gonna spread these commitments, or are they commitments that even though not legal? And so straight to discussion. So I think we need to do that.
Amy, do you have a comment?
Oh, I was going to make a brief comment of just in the framework, it did identify as part of a consideration for these projects to think about long-term funding commitments or funding needs. So I appreciate that the board had thought about that early on. And so it is allowing us to document some of these considerations and discussions. And then I certainly agree with Director Gray that this will be an iterative process as we learn about this program and may need to rethink some of these administrative pieces.
Director Alby.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Alby, second by Gray. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All righty, good discussion, 4 good projects, yes.
If I may, I have one of our director, Tim Winkler, online with us, and he had requested that he would like to
Oh,
comment with the
absolutely.
board, and
You
I know Mr. Steve Jamison, our project engineer, chief project engineer, I don't think he's gonna have a comment to say, but I know Director Tim Winkler would like to share something with the board if appropriate.
Absolutely, my apologies, just for the benefit of those online, yes.
Pardon me, President Whitmore, but excuse me, during the vote, Director Alby, is it correct for the record to reflect that you abstained from?
That's correct, thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't catch. Thank you. But of course, it was obvious that, I mean, it was necessary. And my apologies to Mr. Winkler. Our screens show the slide presentation from staff. And so we don't see continually who is with us or who would like to speak. So yes, of course.
Mr. Winkler, do you want to turn your camera on? Go ahead, you're unmuted on our end. Mr. Winkler, are you there?
Who else did you have?
Steve Jamison was there, but I don't think he had a comment. He was just listening in, but
It appears Mr. Winkler, while his black box is there with his name and he's been unmuted, he's not responsive at the moment.
well, on behalf of the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District, they're very thankful. Extend our gratitude to you, and we look forward to have an active partnership with the River District and Western Slope water users as we progress this project. Thank you very much for your generous support.
Yes. Thank you. Yes,
Just
Director
a
Alba.
quick question, maybe Mr. Winkler will appear in the meantime. In cases like this where Al's involved in the project, there was a comment that we know he can't say too much. What is the guideline for that? I mean, many of us are going to be involved in some level with projects that come before the board. And to me, it's really helpful to hear from someone who's directly involved with the project, but I don't want that to cross over any legal boundaries, so.
Peter, would you like to discuss the ethical considerations here of a director who is involved with a project? In this instance, it was Director Vandenbrink, who's employed by the Rio Grande district. Sorry, Rio Blanco district. And so his salary is paid by the Rio Blanco district, so he has to some extent a financial interest, but would you like to?
I think this disclosure is appropriate. He recused himself from the vote, which is also appropriate. And, other than that, this is a public policy making board, and the board can decide how to allocate. And those two provisions, those two actions are consistent with the River District bylaws, and River District's bylaws by reference incorporate the provisions of Colorado law in terms of conflicts with public.
So there's no prohibition against asking the director who is involved in the project for further information about that project, right?
No, I think open and transparent is the best policy, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, I think all I would ask of the board is to keep in mind the appearances. There's the legal part here, correctly identified. If the director has a personal financial interest in the project, it clearly is something he maybe sees himself, but there's more to that. There's the smell test and the public appearance. I think I would ask directors just to keep that in mind. I think that it is a matter of personal call, but just I think this board has to be commended for its ethical behavior and when it comes to projects that involve members ditch companies and things. I would hope that we continue that just because the public needs to have confidence in the way this board conducts it.
Thanks, Lee.
Okay.
So are we done with the grant funding?
We are, I think, finished now.
Yeah, I
Yes?
would say the rest in the board packet, we did approve 5 grants through our general manager authority. Their descriptions in the packet.
Right.
Equity charts are in the packet, so unless there are any questions, we can wrap up with CFP.
So I have a question if I could, and it's kind of related to this. Do we know what's happening with the infrastructure bill and this magic money that's?
We've got
coming
the
up?
federal affairs is coming up.
And we'll talk about it then?
Yes.
We'll
Thank
get
you
more
very much.
information in one of the next
Magic
items.
money.
Here's what here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a 5-minute break. We are considerably behind. We have some things that have to get done today on some specific time frames. So we may be rearranging the agenda just a little bit to accomplish that, but 5-minute break. Okay?
See, that's what you need, details.
Our next. Thank you. Zane is going to take us through the policy discussion on the multi-benefit water projects policy. As you'll recall, this was a policy that we adopted earlier. There's some fairly minor revisions to it.
Was not adopted. This is a new policy.
Oh,
I've
sorry.
requested before, but this is the third time.
I was gonna say, we've discussed it before. And so we've got some additional slight wording changes. Hopefully, everybody's had a chance to look at that in their packets. And Zane, what,
The changes reflected on the document in front of you and in the board packet include the requested changes from at least 2 directors at the July meeting. I feel comfortable with requests from the board.
so we've got, oh, Taylor.
Taylor's here.
Please let the records reflect that Director Hawes has joined us. And Director Healy's. Director Healy's still with us.
You have a quorum.
We need 9. All right, we've got 9. Okay, any questions for Zane on this policy? I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
A second.
Motion by Richard, second by Curry. Is there any further discussion on the policy? If not, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, thank you very much, Zane. And then let's move right into external affairs.
All right, good morning, directors. I know we're short on time, so we're going to keep our external affairs team update rather brief. We'll start just really quickly with an overview on recent events. Most recently was our annual water seminar on October 1st. This year's seminar was held as a hybrid event in more ways than one. Not only did we host an in-person crowd of 130 attendees, not including board and staff present, but we also had a virtual audience of 214. So in total, 344 members of the public were engaged with this year's seminar. It was also unique in its overlap with another event across the continental divide, as the Getch's Wilkinson Center at the University of Colorado Law was also hosting their 41st annual environmental law conference on the same day as our seminar. And while this presented us with a giant lemon of a situation, we decided to turn it into lemonade and coordinate a special simulcast between the two events with 2 keynotes and our hydrology discussion reaching an even broader audience. All in all, we received incredibly positive feedback from both in-person and virtual audience members, and count the 2021 annual water seminar as a great success. We on the external affairs team extend our thanks to all staff, board, speakers, and other parties who were involved. Other than that, I think we're going to skip over some of the other content that was in our memo, but we will be sending out an email, particularly about the census data that Lindsay has compiled, which will be informing our new communication strategic plan that will be developing moving forward. With that, I'm turning it over to.
I want to take 10 seconds and recognize these 2 new members of the EA team and the hard work that they put into the seminar. They're rookies without the help of Treese or Martha or Grant like I had when I came on the EA team. These 2 came in as total greenhorns and knocked it out of the park.
It was a great. It really was a very excellent seminar. I think it was very well attended in person, and obviously the virtual attendance was even better. So nice job. And anybody have any comments for them on the annual seminar?
Are you sending out an evaluation to participants?
We have sent out an email to everyone who attends both virtually and in person, saying to send in their feedback. They have it to us at the external affairs team, but so far, other than we had a great experience, and I think Lindsay, you received an email about that informing some of their teaching moving forward at the university. Other than that, we haven't had much feedback. So
Nice job.
We do have one action item on the EA agenda today. Staff is requesting authorization for the general manager to enter into a contract with Vital Films for our video production services for the next 2 years at the amount not to exceed $50,000.
And can you just summarize for us what the plan is for that?
Vital is a West Slope-based film production and editing company. Many of you have met them as they've been out in the field with me, whether it be at cattle harvest with the Director Richard or at Director Alby's packing plant. They put together under a separate contract that's now expired all of our previous film products that aided significantly in boosting our public brand awareness and our name recognition in advance of the 7A campaign. They're a professional firm. They're a locally owned business on the Western Slope and have done great work for us in the past. And we're looking to continue that in 2 general areas. One is to better tell the stories of the community funding partnership and increase the awareness of our constituents of that program and success of it, but also to help further expand our storytelling of the water users we represent and the issues that they face.
Was this the group that did the, what I'm just gonna call the ad with Andy on the rafting the river?
Yes, yeah, they did all of our film projects over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
They've
Great,
done excellent work.
yes, great, thank you. Are there questions for Zane about this item? Yes, Director McGinnis.
Myself, does this go through a bid process? Were there any other interested parties? Or
It was a continuation of a firm that we had done previous work with. We did not.
yesterday we talked about our auditors. We continue to work with the auditor, but we still put it up for bid, so that's not.
I don't think we did put the audit out for bid this year because typically we stay with the auditors for about 3 or 4 years. Next year, in 2022, we'll put it out for bid with kind of the same expectation, I think.
Correct.
And that
Put it on policy. Without the bid, we just automatically.
No, most often, we do look at competitive bids on many of our contracts. I would say not all. In particular, creative work like this, the product varies. When we initially hired Vital Films, we did look at, and I think we just hired Vital Films 2 years ago for the initial project. And when we did that, we looked at a number of different firms, put it out to bid, looked at their competing quality. And I have to say, these folks at Vital Films are head and shoulders above the other competitors in the area that have been on it. The product, I will tell you that the feedback we've gotten, not just from the board, but from the general public about our initial work that was done by Vital Films has absolutely been head and shoulders product above everybody. I mean, I had organizations from the full spectrum of our constituents contact us to find out who's producing this stuff because it's the best stuff they've ever seen. Because of that, we did not put this back out to bid because for us, our messaging and the clarity of the messaging and the quality of that creative product is so important. That is a rare instance, though, I would say. I mean, we tried, just Hunter's not in the room, but Hunter runs our asset management, so all of our reservoirs and operations. And I'm constantly sending them back out to get more bids on any of our contractors that we're hiring. We do run into things, as I think you guys may in Mason County as well, where, and maybe not as much in Mason County, but we have, because of the remote location of our assets, we oftentimes are lucky if we can find one party who's an interest in serving. So, but we do try our best, and we do have significant competitive efforts there. So.
Is it 60,000 per year or 60,000 for the 2 years?
30,000 for the 2 year, not to exceed 60 over 2.
Thank you.
And I would just note that we did interview multiple film production companies before we originally hired Vital, and Vital came in at a more competitive price and delivered a far superior product than anybody else that I could.
Okay. Any other discussion or do we have a motion? Move to approve staff recommendation. Motion by Chandler Henry, second by Hezzy. Yes. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion or questions about this? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you guys. I've promised the that we'll move quickly through state and federal affairs. I did send to you last night an update on the interim committee bills that were released just a few short days ago. I will be as candid as I can with you and note my personal opinion that most of these bills are unnecessary. Most of them face a very stiff challenge to receive the 7 of 10 votes necessary to move out of committee. I will, at the direction of council and general manager, as well as if you have direction on any specific bills, be having conversations in the coming days with members of the interim committee to convey our concerns. I don't know that we have time to go through each of them individually, but I'm happy to answer questions.
But does anyone have questions? Because we did get an email last night. Yes, Director McGinnis.
So do you sense a general trend in these bills you're saying regarding water, just kind of an overall trend?
With regards to some, yes, it's a continuing effort by certain entities to push. For example, bill number 3, the water efficiency savings, we dealt with that in 2014 prior to my arrival. We dealt with that in 2020. I think we're dealing with a breakdown at the legislature right now caused largely by the pandemic. When this bill, as an example, was last PI'd by its sponsor, Jenny Arndt, she did so with a promise to us and others that it would receive a thorough conversation and robust deliberation within an interim process. We didn't have an interim committee process last summer because of the pandemic. And then we stepped into this summer and quite frankly, I don't think we saw the leadership that we were used to on the committee. And it was a bit disjointed this year due to a lack of leadership.
At our expense?
Not at our expense yet. We're doing everything we can to make sure that our concerns are addressed and will be obviously any of these that make their way out of an interim committee have to go through the standard legislative process, and we'll be there every day throughout that process.
I might want to follow, Madam Chair. So do you feel you have, I realize we put the budget and so on, but do you feel comfortable with the manpower you've got to represent our interests?
I do. And it's really the partnerships that we have on both sides of the aisle. River District has long maintained strong partnerships, not only within our district, but in every other basin in the state. And so I feel confident that we will be able to have our concerns addressed. Obviously, as you know from your time at the State House, there are never any guarantees. And I have some significant concerns with some of these things, but we'll be there to voice those.
Thank you.
Director Curry.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy, for the memo last night and for taking a look at these. I just was confused about the investment water speculation prohibition bill. And I think that was the second one on,
Yep.
Yeah, second one on the list. And I thought that was a Donovan bill, but regardless of whoever requested it, right now it applies to mutual ditch companies. Have you heard whether, because we don't really have any of those in Gunnison County. So I don't think the bill has a direct impact on my folks at home, but do you know if they're thinking of changing that, or was that on purpose, or?
To be completely honest, I have no idea. And it has a lot of us in the lobby corps scratching our heads.
Yeah.
These interim bills received a total of 6 minutes of conversation at the very end of a long meeting
Yeah.
last month in September. I think it'll be interesting to see the fiscal note on that bill.
True.
I think it's hard to understand why Senator Quorum made that specific to mutual ditch companies, given that MDCs are prolific in his district either. So this is one of 2 bills that I'm concerned about, largely because it provides the state engineer with authorities that I see as outside of their expertise.
Yeah, we have tremendous concern, but from the staff level, and can't imagine, given previous policy direction from this board, that this board would ever support these concepts. So having a state engineer determine if someone's committing perjury is an absurd.
Again, these are going to face a very tough uphill battle to get the supermajority necessary. I think the redefining the scope of the interim committee is likely to proceed. We already spend a lot of our time at the interim, during the interim sessions, talking about agricultural issues. I don't have any concerns. I haven't heard concerns from council or the general.
Okay. Zane, can you comment on the redistricting bill and what impact the new districting has on the district?
So we've seen final maps in just the last couple of days that where the commission has created 38 safe Democratic seats for the House. the 21 state Republican seats, I think there were 6 districts where the average of the past election result fell within a 5% margin. That the state house is currently made up, I believe, of 42 Dems and 23 Republicans. So that's not a major landslide towards the Progressive Caucus, largely due to the Independent Redistricting Commission. In the Senate, the final map had 19 Senate Democratic seats and 12 Republican seats, again from 20 and 15 currently. So not a major overhaul there, and I think many of the Democrats are probably shooting themselves in the feet for, or feel like they shot themselves in the feet because the Republicans have actually made a couple of seat gains in both chambers as a result of it.
Did it get adjusted in any way that will alter the number of people we have in Denver on the western slope?
That's a good question. This second map that was released by the commission did hit a couple of the Republican incumbents against Republican incumbents. I believe that we're largely safe. We don't take a hit on total number of representatives under the century that's been voted.
About the congressional.
Congressional districts are in our federal affairs memo.
Okay.
And that may be a great segue unless there are other questions on state.
Anybody have questions about what's happening in Denver, state affairs?
Federal redistricting, as proposed and what the Supreme Court is charged with approving now, Colorado's second congressional district would reach over into the river district counties of Route, Grand, Summit, and Eagle. They would share that district with Front Range counties, Weld, Jefferson, and Boulder. The third district would include the remainder of the river district counties along with the San Luis Valley and Pueblo. It is not consistent with many of the concerns raised by board county commissioners in the district or by many of the groups that were actively involved in the redistricting process. When it comes to mind, HNC and others. But it does, I think there's some merit to the idea that we have representation on both sides of the aisle within the district. We've worked well with Representative Neguse in the past, and although he only currently represents a small section of the river district territory, he's been open to our concerns, and the same is true of Representative Bovert, who currently represents the vast majority. So I don't have a ton of concerns about this because we have working relationships with them. And as proposed, I think this would create safe seats for them.
So on the reapportionment of the state, so redistricting on the, when we ended up, when it was originally proposed, to split us in half, which eventually meant that we're never be a congressional person from the West Slope. But this one is good in Congressman, at least fantastic. And I think that for the redistrict, I think we're in good shape for the district center.
Director Curry, I think you had a question about the infrastructure there.
Oh, yeah, I did. That's right.
Show me the money. Is that your question?
Yeah, I had that question.
I'm sorry, Director Monroe.
It's the last sentence of my federal affairs memo, which should clearly state clear as mud. I think, as we're all aware, the Democrats in Congress are attempting to pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill that has been tied since the get-go with the reconciliation bill. It's triple its size. Yesterday, we saw the president come out and limit the cap to a $2 trillion package on reconciliation, which is much smaller than he had proposed. Senator Manchin of West Virginia is doing a good job of torpedoing, in his opinion, a good job of torpedoing the climate components of that reconciliation package. Speaker Pelosi has committed to having a vote on the bipartisan package by Halloween. It honestly shifts hour to hour, and as much as I track it, it changes constantly, and it remains the same constantly. And sadly, we just don't have a lot of clarity on whether the Democrats can get their caucus together in order to pass both packages, and if not, whether or not we can pass, whether they can pass the bipartisan package as standard. I will note that the state and many of our communities within the district are starting to make plans for some of these dollars, at least from the bipartisan package. I and Andy and others are engaged in conversations with state leaders and others on how the state could best put to use many of the Western water infrastructure dollars in the bipartisan package. We don't know what the future holds, and while it'll be important to be prepared and have a plan for how to put those dollars to use, there's no guarantee that we'll ever see.
Yeah, and I would just say, currently in the bipartisan bill, there's 8.3 billion for Western water infrastructure. Zane and I were both involved heavily with Senator Hickenlooper's staff and himself and Senator Bennett. We have also, through the alliances we are members of, been following very closely and trying to make sure that money stays in that bill. Okay? And that's really the single biggest issue for Western water, is that 8.3 billion that's in the partisan bill. And so we're going to keep our fingers in it, keep pushing. When and if we see that at risk, we have gotten on the horn and yelled and screamed and pleaded and begged and all of those things.
The breakdown of that, the Western water infrastructure package is included in the final page of the federal affairs.
Thank you very much. By the way, you write very, very thorough, good memos. And all of our staff does, and it's very useful. It helps these meetings, be much more productive.
Thank you, Madam President.
Director Alvey had a question, then Vanden Brink, Munger, and then McKay.
So this may be in that area that nobody knows yet, but of that money that's appropriated for Western water, do we have a sense of whether it will be distributed directly to states or through existing programs or through newly created programs?
Existing programs largely, if the 8.3 goes to the Title IX program, Bureau of Revenue.
Thanks.
Vanden Brink.
Yeah, one of the things, one of the things that we're learning as we're working through some of these programs, whether it's from just doing something small for an ag, is there's such a bottleneck because there's a lack of capacity with staffing to get get through these programs. So it's great to have this big pile of cash sitting there, but if you don't have the staff to kind of work through it, you're sitting there in a 24-month limbo saying, well, okay, when's my number up? Then I can kind of go in front of the counter and go through my application. So there's a considerable bottleneck there. And we've shared that with our congressman, and I don't know how much they're listening, but I know we're working with USDA on another project, and one individual taking care of all of Western Slope. That's a real problem. So somewhere we got to get people back to work, but also get those offices the support that they need so that they can transfer through all these wonderful projects that are sitting out there. So it needs to happen.
We have worked with our congressional delegation on those very issues and tried to push that issue thoroughly. Unfortunately, those USDA offices and our NCS in particular was truly gutted. So they're restaffing, but like anything in the federal government level, it seems to take much more time than anything else I've ever seen.
Well, to add, I mean, Rio Blanco County and Moffett County shares an NRCS we share one. Granted, we don't have a lot of population, but we got a lot of real estate.
I'd say there's $100 million that came out of the House Ag Committee specifically devoted to reviews to increase the federal government's capacity to act. Large infrastructure projects that you and I are watching. I think the largest challenge there, but Andy and I and others have seen is at the state. How do we get an influx of cash from the feds to the state and help them get the dollars out the door in a meaningful manner?
Sorry.
Laughing at me now?
Director Gray, and then Director Bonder, and then Director McKay. I thought you,
Oh, yeah, I'll be fine. I just wondered if you had an update on Lotus. I heard a radio announcement last week that administration was reviving. You heard me, Lotus.
U.S. District Court for Arizona did strike down the Trump Lotus. The Biden administration has come forward saying that they're going to move forward with their own rulemaking. Previous comments on the record by Biden appointees indicate that they're going to try to thread the needle somewhere between the Obama Lotus rule and the Biden, or excuse me, and the Trump Lotus rule. I think it will be in the district's best interest to advocate at a grass tops level to ensure that we get the meaningful agricultural exemptions that we've relied on for many years, as well as consistency and reliability for our water users. We all want the ping pong game to stop. This back and forth does not provide certainty for anybody. So if we can find a middle ground on clean water that gives us the certainty we need and includes those robust and durable ag exemptions that we've relied on for a long time, I'd say that would be a win for us.
So I guess, so I'm looking at the memo that you sent, Zane, and I guess you did a good job as our chair alludes in writing it up. I guess I'm still confused. What are we really asking for? And what's the pretense behind it? And how do we come up with, well, is 8.3 a drop in the bucket, or is that 10 times more than we need? And what do we need and where do we need it? And again, who came up with these numbers? And then back to your comment, how do we figure out how these silly numbers get back onto the ground somehow in our district? And how do we figure out how to lobby for these things? I mean, all of these, the hungry dog gets the steak, so.
And I think we on the Western Slope are used to getting out there and fighting at a level above our weight class.
But we really
worked with both Family Farm Alliance, Western Resource Advocates, and a handful of other alliances that were in direct communications with the Bureau of Reclamation and our delegation to identify and come up with 8.3. Quite frankly, we wanted more, and the letter that the board deliberated over and ultimately approved at the July meeting had a call for a larger slice of the pie. We know we're going to be up against the ropes when California comes seeking the lion's share of these dollars, but we're lucky that we have a delegation that listens to us and is willing to work with us in the alliances that we're in.
Yeah, and I know about the Family Farm Alliance, and I mean, well, Pat O'Toole is going to be plugging for his project, and he actually has a vision out there, and I just worry a little bit. Sometimes we don't have that vision out there. We don't have something identified as in the Rio Blanco County Conservancy's reservoir. We don't have that, something that we really want to see out there. I don't have it. I'm just as bad as anybody. I'm not that visionary type of person either, but we have needs. I want to make sure that we're at the table when they're handing out the dessert. So,
yeah, and I would point to the $250 million for desal, $1 billion for water recycling and reuse. A lot of these line items are specifically intended for lower basin implementation, but we are supportive of that, and this board was supportive of those investments because it helps the lower basin use less water. And hopefully address the structural deficit that we point the finger at often. I think we are, the focus of the committees was on aging infrastructure and on dam safety, 300 million for the drought contingency plans. I think these are pretty specific, and it will be up to us and others to get out there and make sure that Colorado and the Upper Basin gets their fair share, fair slice of the pie.
well, aging infrastructure is a big deal. I mean, especially with our 100-year-old, everything that we have in this state is 100 years old right now. So I'll defer. Director Curry.
well, Director McInnes was next and then Director Curry.
When you say first in line to dessert, kind of like going to a long banquet with dessert served at the beginning. Not even find a marriage sometimes, you know? But look, while we're dancing with glee, what really could impact our district, the missile on the radar is how they're gonna pay for it. One of them is that step-up process, and it will be punitive if it survives. Hopefully, I think there's counterbalance in the Senate. But that then will open up our agriculture community to big equity funds corporate, because in not only is the step-up process eliminating one of the in one of the proposals, but it also adds a carrying charge from the original base for every year subsequent to that base that will be added in addition to the capital gains taxation. So, and punitive is, I'm not overstating the case. There'll be families out there that will actually, I think, if some of this goes through, will position themselves, and it applies to small business too, not just agriculture. And we have ski areas, a lot of different things that are important to our tax base out there. But some of them are so punitive that it could position beneficiaries to deny the inheritance simply because of the law. So, and when this was mentioned to Senator Hickenlooper, by somebody that talked about it, the thing was, well, we're going to put some ag exemptions in there. I'm not sure a lot of attention was paid to it, but on the Senate side, keep an eye out for that, and we have to keep in mind it's going to, portion of it anyway, it's going to have to be paid. And in our particular district, people that combine family income of $400,000 isn't necessarily the wealth that they keep talking about. So that's the missile I see on the, all the money's going to come up front, but so I'm just cautious.
Okay. Do we have any other comments or questions for them? Thank you, Thane. As always, we really appreciate your efforts and your work. Okay, we're going to move on to project operations and update.
Directors, have a memo providing some summary of updates on the Wolfram Mountain project. The first item there is on maintenance. We've completed some concrete repair thanks to our contractor BNRW Construction. That was repair of this, both the service and auxiliary spillway and some there, some minor structures. We also implemented a repair of a butterfly valve. Fortunately, that ended up being under warranty because it was a result of a manufacturing defect. So Deserve valves came out, repaired that. That's done. They did identify something that we'll have to follow up on next year. So you'll see that next year. At the rec area, this is the second year that Pass Creek Investments has been acting as the concessionaire. I'd say it's going really well, and consistent with last year, we're seeing about 4 times the revenue that we saw in 2019. So that's largely attributable to a fee increase at the recreation area. Also, our split, we increased our portion of the revenue, so we get more money and there's more money to be had. And it seems to be working well for the concessionaire. There's also probably some demand increase from the pandemic and just outdoor activities. The next item there is dam safety. So the River District staff, like any large dam owner, we perform dam safety exercises on an annual basis. A little bit different this year. We coordinated with Denver Water and performed a combined Williams Fork Wolfram Mountain Reservoir tabletop exercise. So we came up with this hypothetical scenario. It was this hypothetical earthquake that impacted both reservoirs. We ran through it with all the emergency management personnel, first responders. It was a good learning opportunity. We better understand our respective dam safety operations. So that was a success. And then lastly, on dam safety, we installed a surveillance system. So we installed 5 cameras at the dam, 2 of them at the shop. We'll just keep a better eye on those assets. We had a couple of vandalism incidents out of the dam. So hopefully this will be a deterrent. We have signage saying that if there's a surveillance system, and it would also be a system that if something else did happen, we would be able to follow up on it. And then lastly, we are working on the 2020 Comprehensive Dam Safety Evaluation recommendations. So we got this list of recommendations. We've been working on those. We've completed many of them, and some of them we're still working on. One of the primary ones is in additional instrumentation. and further materials analysis. Part of that will require drilling, so we will go out, we'll drill, we'll do some in situ testing of the dam materials, and we'll also use that drilling to install additional instrumentation. Our consultant, HDR Engineering, they're working on nailing down a drilling operation that will be able to come out. Ideally, that's going to happen this fall, and we're pushing hard for that. There are things outside our control. It's a really tight market with kind of leftover demand from last year. So that may get pushed to next year, but we're really going to push hard to make sure that happens before filling next year, just because it's helpful to have the instrumentation in place before we fill, because we want to see the deformation behavior during filling. Those are my updates, unless someone has questions.
So on the, and again, we don't need to talk about this today, but the recreation area, do we have a long-term plan for that? Do we have an improvement plan? Do we have customer surveys? Well, it's great they're being used, and again, how far are we into capacity? And do we have more capacity? Should we be adding to it?
Yeah, I would say that on weekends during the summer, we're pretty much at capacity. I think on summer weekends, we're at like 97% or something. Pretty much maxed out. There might be opportunities to expand, but I don't think that there's any plans for that.
Can I just speak to that?
Please, yeah.
Our rec area is a requirement of our 1041 permit, but even under Hunter's excellent fiscal leadership and the increased revenues, it is a money loser for this district.
Yeah.
It is unlikely you will ever get a recommendation from me, if I'm general manager, to expand a money losing operation. So just call it like it is. So the answer is no. Unless directed otherwise by you, continue to exacerbate our bleeding.
Guess the money loser part, do we see that? I mean,
Do we see
you
it?
see it.
We can have a report for you in January if you want.
And again, I'm not advocating for that or whatever. I appreciate that, we have to do it because of 1041 and the rest. And I think that's a good idea. But I want to make sure that we're having a safe environment as well as a pleasurable environment too, because we do have our fingerprints on it. So
We provided a really high quality product at that store. We spent a lot of money maintaining and preserving it. I think it's a good thing that we provided. I don't mean to sound resentful for the 1041 permit requirements. I just don't think there's a way to operate that profitably from our perspective. And it is, frankly, the operation of a recreational amenity is far outside the mission of this district. And so we have to have it because we're required. We're a water supply agency. We own a reservoir that we deliver water. That's what we do. Okay, and I'm unless directed otherwise by you, I'm gonna keep doing it.
Second what Andy says. I run recreation and it's a hog. It's a money loser. You can't, you're never good enough. So it's not worth the investment unless you can get GOCO or the state or to come in and help you out. It's really hard along that aspect, or get a state park in there. That's totally different.
well, that's why I guess I'm just bringing up. I wouldn't give up the state park at Stagecoach. It's a wonderful thing. We want to be good neighbors to them. We, Upper Yampa, make sure we take good care of them too. So, because there's a lot of value in that, and not having to do that. So, okay, I'll shut up.
Okay. Any questions of Hunter? Yes, Director McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Hunter, I'm not sure how we do our operations because I'm new to the board, but dealing with our maintenance subcontractors and so on, or keeping, or I think we'd be well advised if we had critical parts that are necessary for any of these operations, that we probably have to overstock our inventory, like butterfly valves or things like that. So looking at in our situation, for example, our landfill operation, we have one critical part break on it, compressor, compactors, things like that.
Yeah.
The order time, to give you an idea, we just ordered 8 new Tahoes, I guess, and they told us we could expect delivery in mid-2023. So those kind of things, critical parts, how do we manage that? Or do you advise the subcontractors, hey, maybe we should advance money, if we need that part in the inventory if something
Yeah.
goes out?
That's an interesting point. We can definitely get in the weeds on this. One good thing with the way our outlet works is designed is that there's redundancy. So there's multiple ways to release water. But it might be worth having a closer look at to see if there's any particular parts or valves or anything that we should have on.
Even if you just put an order in, it's still probably gonna be months before you get it, because the whole thing's messed.
Fair point.
Any other questions or comments? All right, you may leave the
Thank you.
Thanks, Hunter.
hot seat
Definitely appreciate it.
and we'll welcome Brendan to the hot seat.
Hello, directors. So I'm here to present a recommendation on board approval for a blue dye contract. So under our statutes, the board needs to approve any contracts above 1,000 acre-feet out of blue dye reservoir. So the CWCB has approached us and staff is making a recommendation before their board in the coming months for a contract with us for 1,700, so 1,750 acre-feet, which will go towards primarily mitigation of anchor ice formation in the lower Picken River. Whatever is not used during the January through March period can also be used down at the 50-mile reach later in the year. So that's the way that we had this contract with them for a couple of years in 2019 and 2021. The local constituents in the lower Picken are primarily the Roaring Fork Conservancy and WAPA are full support of this. It's something that they've really been pushing for. And it really helps with the fly fishing.
If I could just can't fill in on this a little bit. One, this is enterprise water, and you'll recall our goal, the enterprise is to actually market our water and make money. Back in 2018, this board first approved a policy allowing staff and directing staff to lease water for non-consumptive in-channel purposes. So since 2018, we've done so. We've made revenues of $250,000 to $500,000 a year since then on in-channel usage. Our in-channel contracts by board policy are limited to 1 year at a time. That's why this keeps coming back to you in a 1-year increment. We're not asking you to change that. I just want to remind the board that that's why we are talking about this. The revenue from this is certainly helping us balance our enterprise budget. So it is doing what was intended in 2018, which is to allow us to maximize revenue on the assets that we have while not emitting water that was originally created for consumptive uses to be tied up if and when those consumptive uses need to develop in the region.
The amount is half what it was last year. What was the? I think that's all they asked for.
Yeah, I think it's funding constraints from their funders within their program.
Director Curry.
Thank you. So if CWCB doesn't formally notice it or approve it till February, can we still make releases in January?
Well, I think their first meeting will be coming up here, I believe, in November, with the second meeting in January. And so I think it'd be February that they could actually get contracting done with us. So part of why we're bringing this before the board is to facilitate that being accomplished.
Other questions? And entertain a motion.
Moved.
Second, Munger.
Motion by Vandenbrink. Actually, I think McInnes had the second. And so discussion. And the motion was for staff recommendation. Is there any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much, Brendan. Definitely appreciate it. We are back on time, actually.
One of the things I would like to just note or suggest for our meetings next year, I think I've made this comment to a number of you. We have a lot of really, really important stuff that we're working with. We've got some big issues. We've had big issues for the last year or so. Not to say that there weren't big issues before, but it just seems that we've got an abundance of really important material that we need to get through, and we want full discussion and opportunity for input and discussion. So I'm going to suggest that everybody, when you're penciling in all of these dates for the meetings, pencil in Wednesdays until like 2 or 3. I know there's always been sort of this expectation that we're pretty much done at noon, or sometimes it was even 10:30 or whatever, and I think that's not going to happen. And so I think it's going to be just better for everybody if you just kind of think in advance, just marking it out until more like mid-afternoon, and then we can adjust the agendas accordingly so that we're not, I think this agenda had a lot of time scheduled for discussion of important items. I think our future agendas will be the same. So that would be my own comment.
Well, thank you. And I just want to draw your attention to a couple of minor things. One, the CRUA conference, the Colorado River Water Users Association conference, is held in Las Vegas every year. This year it's December 14th through 16th. If there are directors who are interested in going to that, if you would please let Stephanie know. She will be making conference reservations. We ask that and hotel room bookings, but we ask that directors make their own plane arrangements, or however it is they want to get out there. Now, the district will reimburse you for that, but we do not want to get in the business of being a travel agent and booking individual plane tickets. I think it's too much work for staff and can get confusing. We will do hotels, the conference itself. If anybody has time on the board, I do find it to be a really useful conference. There are people over, usually about 1,000 people from throughout the basin. Every water user constituency is there. There's usually some pretty informative presentations, and I know, despite my dislike of Vegas, I find the experience worth my time. So I just would encourage you to think about it. The next one is a lower basin fact-finding tour, which has been a victim of COVID for multiple times now. We are moving forward with scheduling that in February. We're shooting for mid-February. I'm sorry that I don't have a better date yet, but I would anticipate that being a 3-day event, possibly travel on either end of that, most likely starting potentially in Vegas or Phoenix and ending in San Diego. So we'll let you know, all of that again. We would encourage you to do that as well. One of the things, and what we're really looking at, is helping develop relationships and better understandings of what's going on down the lower basin. There are a number of fallowing programs in agriculture we would intend and have made contacts with both the Imperial Irrigation District and the Palo Verde Irrigation District, PDID. We think it's worthwhile looking at that. We're working on also talking to some folks in the local Chamber of Commerce in Blythe to understand some of the secondary impacts, because those fallowing programs have some big fans, mainly people who've been paid a lot of money by Met to follow their project, follow their property, and then they have a lot of negative impacts on local businesses. And so I think it's worth looking at that from our perspective and understanding that. The visit in San Diego, we're shooting for a discussion at their augmentation plans down in the lower basin. As you know, there's always the discussion about importing water. San Diego has a giant desal plant where they They are operational and desalinating and providing drinking water for the population. Something I think is of interest to us to understand what it is the lower basin is really doing now. Discussion hopefully with Southern Nevada Water Authority, the Hoover Dam, and the Bureau of Reclamation there, a view of pumping plants that are that our favorite folks at the Central Arizona Project. They have a rather remarkable pumping facility, and Met right across the lake at Havasu there has their older pumping facility. These are interesting things to see and know and understand, because sometimes it feels so theoretical. So just throwing that out there, trying to entice you to come. As soon as we have details and everything, we'll be getting out to you. But just think about it. I realize this board is a huge commitment for you, and we're just piling on, but this is some important stuff from my perspective. We do intend to invite some of our local constituents and potentially our CWCB reps and others to join us on this, as well as Southwestern. We are appropriately paying the director's expenses and a limited number of staff members who will be on this tour. If we're inviting other parties, they will carry their own freight.
Andy, if I may, I've seen that pump facility down at Havasu by Park, I think it's by Parker, that little town.
Right by Parker.
Holy cow, that thing is massive. Man, I just, it's so impressive, and it's all concrete. I mean, it's.
And the Art Deco building across the river just goes back to the 30s and when architecture actually mattered, as opposed to the gap put in the 60s.
And the bluegill fishing in February is phenomenal.
Okay, moving right along. And then the other one that if Vegas or the lower basin is too far away and too much time, we do have the annual Colorado Water Congress Convention and that I believe is going to be located at the just saw it at the Hyatt out in Aurora, Hyatt Conference Center, and I've not been there myself, but it's planning on being out there. I don't know if we saw dates. I think it's January 26th is the date that I recall on that. Again, same thing, would encourage you to participate in that. We'll send out details as we know it. These are just events and opportunities to help inform your decision-making as well. So, thank you. I think we're done with that. We'll just say there are box lunches here for the directors. Would encourage you to do that. I think you're going to go into most likely executive session, because I understand you're going to talk about Peter and myself and personnel discussions. We prefer you not do that at a public meeting, but that's your call, not ours. Although the law might have something to say about it. We encourage you to ask any more questions before the rest of the staff. And Peter and I are going to step out as well while you have your initiative.
Yeah, we're concurrent.
Yeah, and this is, I think we're on the same page. I could really use a tour of Grand County and of the facilities up on the upper river, upper Big River. And I talked a little bit last night with Mike and a little bit with Tom about going up and just visiting some of their country. And we just assumed we had to keep it just 2 board members, right, to do that. But we were going to set that up because I love the lower basin idea. That's great, but I just need some familiarity with those counties up there.
We do try to have participation in tours internally. But in a year where we're going to have the lower basin tour, we would not want to also put together an intra-state tour. But we will have those opportunities coming up. I just can't. I will say this is a expense-wise and planning-wise, it's a big lift for the district personnel. And you can ask DK and Stephanie, who are primary on the lower basin tour. They're going to be doing a lot of work.
Is it okay if I do that informally then? If we just drive around it?
Of course, you can do it if you can have 3 or more directors for river district purposes. Just let us know and we'll notice it. And
Okay.
Yeah. Director Ponder.
Did you guys ever finish the new director orientation on the Yampa?
We did.
Okay, I didn't get a copy of that. I'd like to, you guys, and I watched the other ones, and again, they're always very good for the rest of us board members as well, but I didn't see that.
Apologize for that, and we will, we didn't get you that notice. I think we noticed everybody, but we'll get you a link, Stephanie, if we can get a link.
Yeah, if you can get me the recording on that, I'd like to watch that as well.
If anybody's interested, we have a new director orientation in person with Director McGinnis coming up here November 18th. It's actually being held in person, so anybody who wants to go through that again, we welcome the experience. Just let us know. And if, again, if there are 3 or more directors, we'll notice it. And
Yes, Director Hawes.
Yes, thank you. Water Education Foundation often has tours as well, so I assume they're going to be picking those back up this coming year. So you might look at their schedule to see if there's some Colorado basin focused tours. And I assume if multiple directors end up on that, that's not an issue. Just you don't have to notice it or anything. Might be helpful. And maybe while I have the floor, I would put in a plug for the Colorado River Water Users Conference this year. I'm sitting on that program committee, and we've got a whole track on the afternoon of the 15th about solutions in the basin, things that are happening, you know, everything from recycling to projects with tribal nations. And so I'd like to think we actually have 2 tracks, one on solutions and one on litigation and touchy topics. So we'll be paying attention to who goes into which track, but it should be interesting just to hear some of the good things that are going on in the basin too.
Thank you. Okay, before we adjourn and go into, or we won't be adjourning, before we take a break to get our lunches and then go immediately, we're just going to bring our lunches back to our seats. We're going to go into executive session right away. And so, you know, like 5 minutes, okay? Before we do that, does anybody have anything else? Okay.
I'm going to admit everybody from the waiting room. We are back in session.
We are back in public session. During our executive session, we attended to the agenda items for personnel evaluations and reviews. No decisions were made during executive session, but evaluations were provided to both the general manager and general counsel. And there were no action items that needed to be addressed in the public session at this time. So unless anyone has something else for the good of the order, or unless I've missed something, this meeting is adjourned.
Very much.
Very good. Thank you.
I want to make sure the transcript from that previously reported meeting.